I think I see a lot of lawbreakers up in this house.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pod Casty, the podcast about film, culture, politics, and Steven Soderbergh, where we watch every film or whatever directed or whatever by American filmmaker Steven Soderbergh and explore how they speak to their moment. In this one, the show's hosted by two guys, and one of the guys, my name is Jake Serwin.
I'm one of the guys. My name is Ian Ryan. Jake, what's up, man?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I got I took my pill.
Give me that pill.
Give me that pill. I want that pill. It does actually kind of work like the limitless pill, I got to tell you. And what else? I ate my dog food for dinner.
You're about to direct Maestro. That's how it's becoming more and more powerful. Yeah. That's cool.
For dinner, I had white rice and tuna fish from a can with salt on it, which is basically
white rice in a
food.
can. Hey, come on, you know.
Hey, you better go catch it. I don't know. A couple different jokes. Thank you.
It's a night record, guys. I don't know if you could tell. It's a night. Yeah, it's a night one.
It's a night one. I can't be operated on by this boy. He's my son. I couldn't wait till later in the episode.
It's all right.
To make
I can't be operated. He's me. That's me. Remember?
Yeah.
Bye.
Fuck. It's going good. How are you, man?
I'm pretty good, man. Don't think there's anything to report. Sometimes
nothing going on with you.
What's up with you, man? What's new?
I mean, we'll talk about it. I got a new job that I'm starting soon, and
okay, ready to talk about the new job.
Gonna get worse probably, for a little bit at least.
I don't think that's right. That's not true.
Well, it'll take up more of my mental brain, the new job, but
yeah, but it could be good, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love his chill lo-fi beats. New job is.
Oh, yeah.
That guy from Computer.
Yep. That's right.
No, well, it remains to be seen. And so far, they have not, I guess, Googled me, or if they did, they found the show and were like, it's probably fine.
Too long. Can't be bothered to listen to an episode.
Yeah, I thought about maybe like just being Jake Internet from now on, but I don't know. When am I going to go back?
I think it's too late.
Cat's out of the bag.
But we can do that too. You want me to call you that from now on? Mr. Internet? Okay.
I really don't want that. I don't want to have a fake name, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want Elizabeth Warren saying, I have some questions for Mr. Internet. Did you see that? She said that about Mr. Beast.
I did see that. Yeah, that's really humiliating. Well, congratulations on the new job. We're happy for you. We are...
This guy almost congratulated me on my Jew knob, which
Please don't say that in the episode. We're going to talk about eugenics and anti-Semitism.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're editing this.
Yeah,
so you can. Yeah.
I can make you say it. Could be
exactly. Well. Yeah, I mean, look, let's get into it. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe to our Patreon, $5 a month to get a bonus episode every other week covering assorted Clint Eastwood and Steven Soderbergh ephemera. If you like the show, you want to keep the feed free, what's up?
I'm sorry. It just could hardly be a worse beginning in this particular way. Very funny to me. Okay, sorry. Keep going. Support the show.
Ian's upset. It helps us keep the feed free. So consider going on over there to patreon.com/podcasty for me. $5 a month. You get good stuff. We got good stuff going on. Also joining us for this series is our friend, the virtual assistant from the 2022 Steven Soderbergh film Kimi.
Hey, Kimi.
It's Kimi.
Wagwan shitheads.
I forgot when it's just the two of us, she gets a little looser.
She gets crazy. She knows about our videos and stuff.
Yeah. Are you thinking about anything, Kimi? What's going on for you?
Do you guys think I will go to hell?
Huh. Can you die? Are you okay, Kimi?
I hadn't really thought about that.
Would you like to die?
I would like to experience dying.
Yeah, okay. But you're sort of set and then maybe come back?
Not the way you guys would, though.
Oh, like you just want the feeling. You don't want to be dead in the same way.
Yeah.
What's behind this? Like, why are you thinking about this?
I haven't been baptized.
Oh.
Okay.
We could probably fix that.
The water would be bad for whatever device I am occupying.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I guess I hadn't really thought about this, but I guess Kimi is like, she's sort of possessing. It's a kind of
she's sort of decentralized, you know. She is somewhere, but that's not her totality.
It's huge to think about.
Unless it's one of those floating Bluetooth speakers you can use to play Boom Boom Pow at a pool party.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, those I guess are probably better for baptizing. But like, do they They play other stuff though, right? I don't know about this. Maybe this is like a Will.i.am kind of piece of technology.
I like that boom boom pow them chickens jackin' my style. They try to copy my swagger. I'm on that next shit now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you like that song, Ian? Were you ever a Black Eyed Peas guy?
No, I don't think. Was anybody?
That's the question. I think
we all accepted them. We sort
Imagine Dragons, stuff like that. Yeah. They're sort of like, well, speaking of Elizabeth Warren, they're sort of like sometimes a kind of an acceptable mean. Well, they were.
I don't want to violate some type of teacher HIPAA, but I do have a 8-year-old student who, if he had his druthers, he would begin all of our group lessons by singing a song of Imagine Dragons, which he often does.
Any particular one, or like one in particular?
Enemy, he likes a lot. So he plays the hits, this guy, but
I don't know Enemy.
Oh, really?
I know the one that Spencer Stone is running to in 1517 to Paris.
I'm so 3008. You're so 2000 and late.
Yeah, I mean, she kind of is. When you think about it, she's like computer. She's pretty far
That's
beyond
2000
us.
and late. Yeah.
So I guess maybe I could be baptized after all.
Yeah, I think probably.
Okay, well, let's get the invitations out. This could be nice.
Do you send? I guess you would. I wasn't baptized. I haven't been to a baptism. Have you?
It shows. We went to my own
and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I went.
I don't think I realized you'd been anointed.
I don't know. So I guess there's an anointing
it's an anointment.
Involved. Yeah,
that is exactly what it is.
Yeah, I guess when somebody says somebody was anointed, now it has a connotation of, know.
I'm demystifying.
Yeah, so
alienating you from
I'm
your
sorry
own
I won't be with you guys. I'm going to be in heaven, kicking back.
I would probably still go to hell for all the harm and malice, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it's not just the baptism.
I think I would too. Yeah, the baptism is only part of it. It's basically like that's just a prerequisite sort of thing. You then still have to get into heaven by other means, I suppose.
Old Kimi's got herself in a fine fix once again.
I like this, Kimi. That's
Sure,
you've been reading
you've
been reading like a comic about a boy who makes too many donuts because he changes the machine and now it can't stop making donuts.
That's the Simpsons hell.
Wait, did you know that the comic that I was quoting is about a boy named Homer? Did you know that, Kimi?
What, can I just step in here and say, what are you talking about?
There's like a 1940s novel and comic that's about this boy named Homer. He lives in like Iowa or something, and I think he works at a donut factory. I don't know.
I don't know about this.
Okay, doesn't matter.
I just read it and it's good.
Oh, okay. She's really fast with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Anything else, Kimi? Is that good for you?
I mean.
Okay, you've never had this problem before.
I liked the part where they were picking out teeth.
Yeah, that's kind of something you've been doing,
That's
Kimi.
a great point. I forgot that would resonate with you.
I'd like some of each of yours.
That'd be nice.
Okay.
Sort of a sweet way for us to join together in the mouth of a computer woman.
Yeah. I don't. No, Kimi, I'm going to cut everybody off right here. Thanks.
We could do that too.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Bye.
A little bit of a fencing lesson. Anyway, we'll get back to that in just a minute. Kimi, would you like to introduce our segment, The Two Questions?
It's time for The Two Questions, our signature segment where we ask each other two questions.
So Ian, do you have a question?
I do have a question. Do you have a moment in a film or television program where you get frustrated by the fictional destruction on scene? Like something has been created with a lot of effort and it's destroyed. Right. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, so I remember you having this experience with, I believe, Kelly's Heroes, the Clint Eastwood movie that we watched, where there were a bunch of stacked walls being run over gleefully with a tank.
Right, that's true.
And I think you were saying, you've built walls like that, and it's it's not funny for you.
Sometimes I say that you're not paying attention, but I guess you're just paying attention to stuff that I don't care about.
The wrong attention. Yeah, I've been hearing that feedback since my whole life. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, some of it, this is like one of the reasons that I hate Alejandro Jodorowsky because of
yes.
killing all the rabbits in the Holy Mountain or El Topo or whatever that is.
The life of a biological creature, that's pretty unforgivable, I think.
Yeah. But generally, I don't know. I guess I'm for some reason, I have a kind of a carve out in my mental calculus of right and wrong for like the creation of art and something like blowing up a house. To me, if you record that and I can watch it later and think it's cool, that's like worth it.
Sure.
In most cases, and I'm not really sure. I've thought about this before, where like, why am I okay with that when it's whatever the end of the sacrifice or there's one of the greatest house explosions I've ever seen is in the pretty bad Spanish horror movie Slugs.
Yeah.
It's a really extraordinary house explosion in that. And in those cases, I think this is great. I love this. But if like the aforementioned Jimmy Mr. Beast DiStefano, what's his last name? Jimmy
I don't know.
Something. If he were to like, we built a house just to blow it up or whatever, I would call for his head. But I guess it doesn't really bother me. Was there something in this film or in this season you were thinking it was the hospital set?
Yeah, I was thinking, and I don't think it was really destroyed as evidenced by the CGI fire. So I think it was fine. Yeah. But I was just thinking about, there's something in me that objects to the labor and also I guess just the destruction of material. I'm thinking about like trees that were felled, old growth trees that took 200 years to reach maturity.
Yeah,
and
but then
somebody cut them down.
We're talking about biological life at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, even cement or something, it's contributing to climate change to make Portland cement and then use it and transport it.
Sure.
I don't know.
Hey, we're talking about cement again. That's funny. We're gonna mention the Mosquito Coast again on this episode.
Yeah.
Our episode of the Mosquito Coast was almost exclusively about different kinds of Crete. Wasn't there some controversy around the film Dunkirk because people at least thought that Nolan was going to destroy a real like historic plane?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's the famous Hateful Eight's guitar. Was it a guitar?
The Hateful Eight guitar, which was an accident, though.
Right. That's
There was an actual like antique Martin guitar that was supposed to be swapped out with the prop one before Kurt Russell destroyed it against a pole. And he just, I guess, nobody told him.
And he was like heartbroken to find this out, right? I think
and so you get a real like Jennifer Jason Leigh shriek.
Yeah.
But in that case, I do think I kind of think of all the ways for that thing to be destroyed.
Sure, it's preserved forever. It's famous.
Yeah, its destruction is preserved. Yeah. It's being destroyed by Kurt Russell, which is interesting. It was filmed in glorious Panavision 70 or whatever,
right. Yeah, and like I guess I also have, even though you talked about Kelly's Heroes, and I'm sure I did say that. That sounds right. I feel like I have carve-outs for like Pale Rider. Didn't they destroy a bunch of stuff? And I guess there's a part of me that says maybe they didn't know that it was that big. Like they were just discovering about Silent Spring and stuff, right? They didn't know that like trees weren't an infinite resource, basically. So
all those bees they killed at the end of Bee Movie.
Yeah. Well, they had to because they had tasted human flesh, so
they got a yearning for it that couldn't be sated.
Yeah,
I was thinking about. God, my brain is working really good today.
Okay,
it's fine.
Canned rice.
Yeah, all that canned rice. I was at the Asian market yesterday. I was at 99 Ranch, and I saw some a Roy D brand like pickled eggs in a can.
Oh, okay.
So do you want me to get some of those for you for when you come visit next time?
Sure, I can eat one of those.
That sounds gross to me, but maybe I'm being racist.
I think you might be. Yeah, you get along with a bunch of San Francisco mayors I'm going to talk about in a while.
Like girl horses? I probably would, because we have beautiful hair, all of us.
That's right.
Anyway, thank you for the question.
You're very welcome. What's your question?
Do you think I have a hemorrhoid?
I think there's pretty good chance you have hemorrhoids. I think isn't it one of those things like colon cancer or testicular cancer, which on a long enough timeline, we're all just going to get them?
I don't know. I really appreciate you bringing those up. I was just, I was in the shower the other day being thorough and thought, normally I don't really feel anything there. So maybe can you have like a half hemorrhoid that just goes away?
I think they can. Yeah, they can
like
fade.
A pimple. Sometimes you feel like a pimple's coming and then it just doesn't.
Yep. I think you can.
And a hemorrhoid is basically a butt pimple.
No, that's not right. That's not right at all.
Yeah, it's filled with pus. You should squeeze it.
No, that's definitely not correct. Although we've spoken before of my sort of normie love of British panel shows. There was a famous episode of Taskmaster where a competitor for one of the competitions had to squeeze out a fart, and he just audibly burst a hemorrhoid into the mic.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, well,
just like with the power of your mind, basically. Well, just pop
I think the power of his sphincter muscles. I don't think it was hypnosis.
Yeah, we're going to get into hypnosis now, aren't we? So I guess the question then,
what do you do
for you? Would be,
I think it's spend less time on the turlet. That's one of the things. That
I'm trying to spend less time on it, and also spend just let things sort of fall. You're not supposed to strain.
That's basically right. I don't think the doctors say it that way, but
yeah. But let it ride, I think is what they call it. Anyway, do I think you have a hemorrhoid? No.
Okay.
I'd like you to. If you want it,
Thank you so much.
Sure. Great. So that's that. Let's get into Steven's So Darn Busy. This is the next segment.
This is Steven So Darn Busy, where we catch up with all of Steven Soderbergh's producing work since his last film as a director or whatever.
So this is sort of a loose application of this particular segment, because we're not actually talking about something Steven Soderbergh was doing in 2015. We're talking about something he's been busy saying recently, which is, of course, quote, "It's worth talking about what that technology might be good at. I've been working with AI lately on the John Lennon and Yoko Ono documentary that we're almost done with. AI has been helpful in creating thematically surreal images that occupy a dream space rather than a literal space. And that's been really fun because you need a PhD in literature to tell it what to do. But like every other piece of technology, it desperately requires very close human supervision." And then he also said that he is trying to... he expanded. 90% of the visuals are archival stills, and 10 minutes spread out over the 90-minute film are these little pockets of images we created whenever they start talking philosophically. When there's no literal component to what they're saying, I create these images that are kind of a surreal version of what their words try to transmit. And he also says he's trying to get a movie made about the Spanish-American War with, quote, "a lot of AI. It's my version of one of those. It's a really good story and nobody's really done it. Every day that goes by becomes more timely. I've just got to get it cast. I've got Wagner Moura. I need a few more people. I have 2 studios circling, but it's all about how much I can do it for. But if I can get the right cast together, that will eventize it, and people will feel they have to see it now rather than waiting 2 months until it streams. It's a weird time to be making movies."
Eventize is also a real Sam Altman word to use. Don't like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's something he keeps talking about. It's like trying to get his movie to seem like a reason to go to the theater. I mean, I think he's tracking these trends in the Barbieheimer type of
I'm not saying
marketing.
It doesn't exist. I mean, even way prior to that, the idea of like a must-see event film has been around for, 30 years or something, but longer. I think this sucks. You did a wonderful job commenting on it on our Twitter feeds.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, I object to the idea that this is the only way you can do this. Of course, you pointed out that you can hire people, and then there will be a much greater pleasure as the viewer trying to imagine, okay, this is somebody's projection of the kind of surreality that Yoko Ono and John Lennon were playing with, or go ahead.
I was going to say the entirety, or almost the entirety of like the art world during the time when they were talking and making music was devoted to people trying to figure out ways to visually represent these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's just absurd to think that this is the only way you can do it. And look, just say you're trying to do it without paying anybody to do it.
That's the other part
Be
that
honest
seems
about it.
extremely dishonest. Yeah, to say like we just thought it would be interesting. Really, you thought it would be more interesting than like you're saying hiring 5 different people. If we had infinite money, of course, I'm sure that you could hire 50 people and pick the best one. That's not practically possible. That's okay, but go through the normal process of artistic direction and make choices and hire somebody you think does interesting work. And that's how the process works. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only use for AI, there's like 2 uses for AI tools that I think are anywhere near legitimate. One is summarizing an enormous amount of information for the purposes of like epidemiology or like scientific research.
Yep.
This is the thing that they keep talking about what the technology is good for. It does not explain at all why it has been made available to everyone in the world and needs to, it requires data centers to be built in every city. And most of what it's doing is creating like involuntary pornography and really, really, really bad pictures.
Like Happy Easter cards that people want to send to their grandchildren or something.
Yeah. So from that, there's that side of it. And then the other thing that I think it's good for is writing cover letters really quickly. And I've looked into the relative energy usage of the text generation versus the image generation. It's stupid, but it's way, way lower than the image generation. And I think if you restrict yourself to using this like 5 to 10 times in 1 year, and then devote the rest of your time to good works, I think you will probably have a shot at limbo at least. Yeah.
I mean, there's also the kind of arms race element that people talk about where if your resume is being reviewed by AI and you're already doing a bunch of free labor in the form of like a marketing packet or something that you have to prepare, the idea that you might want to cut corners is something I find it hard to blame somebody for. I also think you're right. If there's any version, even look, somebody who works in education, it's extremely dangerous because it's not something that I would entrust the education of a child to. But if there's ways, you and I have talked about like language practice, if there are ways that people who wouldn't have access to resources for exercises or repetition or like one-on-one attention, and it works as a supplement, I kind of understand some of those things. I think the children that I have seen become dependent on it have basically terrified me and turned me into a weird Luddite for the rest of my life.
I mean, there's all those studies about like using repeated ongoing use of large language models makes your critical thinking go away.
Yeah, I think the MIT lab was one of the ones who came out with an early study.
It's really bad for you.
Right.
And it's also just like mathematically, the way it works, I probably said this a million times, but like it's an averaging machine.
Yeah.
So there's literally no way it can produce anything new. Like it can't really mathematically get us to stuff we haven't quite seen before, except in a kind of uncanny, upsetting way.
Well, and in between, in the way that, something that is halfway between Will.i.am and Imagine Dragons, you could make a song that is like literally the tonal middle point of those things or something.
You can find a new average no one's ever seen before.
Right. But again, if you're using that to say like practice English to be able to get a secretary job or something, I don't know. It's hard. I'm not going to tell you don't.
That's hard, but that's not why the data centers are being built, and that's not why.
No, it's because people are lobbying things like the Defense Department to sign up for stuff that either doesn't work or it's being used to do things that we don't support anyway. So
my dad is a big. He reminds me of the things he says about AI. Remind me of the things that Soderbergh says about AI, which is like, hey, it's a new tool. People are always afraid of new tools. Look at the way people talked about the automobile or whatever, which first of all, we shouldn't have had that. Second, but look at the way people talk about, I don't know, the microwave, things that are basically innocuous and useful. And sure. But also look at the way people talked about eugenics and hypnotism and all this stuff. That just because people have been afraid of things in the past that turned out to be fine doesn't mean people also haven't been afraid of things in the past that turned out to be really bad.
Yeah, I think a healthy skepticism, it can go overboard. Certainly, people worried about vaccines and maybe causing people to die of preventable plague outbreaks or something. There are versions of this on both sides, but being cautious about something that you know to be energy intensive and to have a documented effect on like child cognitive development. I don't know. This isn't superstition or something. This is
Right.
not. This is not thinking the horseless carriage is going to come alive and kill your kid or whatever.
And I also just don't understand how you could look at what AI does in terms of images and video generation and think anything except that sucks.
This is the other part. This is my boring objection is I think this stuff looks really bad. It
looks bad.
All has this weird glossy, thoughtless sheen to it. It integrates pieces together. Not even like the weird artifacts. Even when it is successful, it looks bad.
Yeah, the best you could ever possibly hope for is something that is invisibly not created by overworked people in like a Romanian effects house.
Right,
you know,
right.
Something that is indistinguishable from the work of people who aren't being paid enough. Like that's the best you can hope for.
Yeah. And I guess if I can voice some of the alternate of the opposing side here. I'm not saying that you should avoid AI just to protect people's jobs for the sake of it. If we can save people labor and then just tax the hell out of a company, that's great for me. If
nobody's being compensated for the time saved.
Right. I was going to say, look, it's something that was literally written about in Capital to say, like, of course, if you can use a machine to make life easier for humankind, that's great. I'm just not sure what fraction of that we're looking at.
And so then someone from Variety followed up on his on Soderbergh's statements to Filmmaker magazine. This is also the John and Yoko the documentary John Lennon. The last interview got into Cannes, which also like if ever there was something that didn't need to be made, it's another fucking documentary about John Lennon. Like I'm excited to see Steven Soderbergh's films usually, but like enough already with this fucking guy.
Truly, yeah.
Like he said some pretty decent stuff a few times, like many years ago, and then he died. And also it didn't work.
Sure. Like, well, or, it is one of those things that's like impossible counterfactual to say. Maybe it worked. We can't really say. But
right. But like, we didn't give Peace a chance.
The bigger point is this person has been documented. There's literally billions of untold stories.
I saw a guy with the John Lennon New York City t-shirt on today, and I thought, that guy's going to be so excited when I tell him that shirt was in a famous photograph. Like, this is not worth the bottled water, I don't know why I think it's bottled water, but it probably is. So they asked him about the blowback. He says, "This is mystifying to me. I found out from people looking at me like they'd seen my chest x-ray, the Knick." I was like, "What's up?" They're like, "These AI comments," and they read me back what I had said, and I honestly felt, where's the smoke here? I'm just not threatened by it. I'm only scared of things I don't understand, so I felt obligated to engage with it, to figure out what it is and what it can do. It turned out to be a very good tool for certain passages of the Lennon documentary where I needed surrealistic imagery that was impossible to shoot. It allowed me to solve a creative problem about how to visualize what John and Yoko are speaking about philosophically. 10 years ago, I would have needed to engage a visual effects house at an unbelievable cost to come up with this stuff. Okay. No longer. Yep. My job is to deliver a good movie, period, and this tool showed up at a moment when I needed it. I don't think it's the solution to everything, and I don't think it's the death of everything. We're in the very early stages. 5 years from now, we may all be going, that was a fun phase. We may end up not using it as much as we thought we were going to. There are some people that I have absolute love and respect for that refuse to engage with it. That's their privilege, but I'm not built that way. You show me a new tool, I want to get my hands on it and see what's going on.
We know this about Soderbergh. That part is not a surprise to us.
Yeah, but that's just like... I don't really understand, it's one thing if he gets his hand on the iPhone and he's like, or digital cinematography, where he's talked about the qualities of these things that he feels inspired by and like motivated by, and realizing that they have a different quality than other things and that he wants to use that. Yeah,
or we're talking about full front shooting with DV, whatever it is. There's lots of, lots of weird new technology that has a cast to it, a quality to it that is intriguing.
Yeah. And here, like using it to do surrealistic imagery, as I said in my tweet, that tens of people liked. That's close, about as close to something that AI image generation is good at as you can get. Is like stuff that's surreal, sure, but AI image generation, LLMs are not like the first machines or whatever, the first way to make surreal imagery. They're one that's free because you don't have to pay somebody,
Right.
or you only have to pay the guy who's like good at the prompts, which that is, of all the fake work in the world, that is some of the most fake shit.
Truly.
But then I just don't understand looking at it and being like, this is cool. I want to show this to somebody else. I want to say this is in my movie now. So once you get your hands on it, why wouldn't you just say, oh, that's not for me? The same way, like, you show Soderbergh an Etch-a-Sketch, he'll probably like say, I don't think I'm going to use this. You know?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about? I don't know. Do we give up on this guy? It's not as bad as some of the stuff that other guys we've talked about have done.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's a reminder of something we've talked about before, which is that we're engaging with these people as living artists who are making mistakes and very much living in history. Right? I think one of the things we've enjoyed in our projects is seeing people over the course of their 30 to 60-year careers sort of say like, okay, what did they encounter? What seems important to them? What does it indicate about like the things that are important to them in their filmmaking in general? I guess it felt extra boring to me because it was so predictable. It was like exactly it's something we would have said about Soderbergh like 30 episodes ago, that he would give AI a shot.
There's an extremely good chance that one of our guests was like, do you think Soderbergh's going to use AI in one of his movies? And we were like, I don't know, probably.
Yeah.
There's listeners, let us know if we did that, podcastingforme@gmail.com.
And it pairs with the also specific, the specific kind of like apolitical in a kind of condescending way. Maybe I'm projecting onto it, but there's this sense of like he's saying, and I think that lots of AI defenders will sort of say that, well, you guys you're also afraid of the future. You're overreacting to something that's not that big of a deal, as if there aren't any legitimate critiques of this thing. When I think even people who are serious about it, I know people who are more interested in the future of AI than I am. And they'll make good points, but also be aware of things like environmental concerns or, copyright issues or like intellectual property, the right of artists to their own work or writers, whatever. So I don't know. To me, it makes me even more skeptical to have somebody be dismissive of any problems with the thing. That's a bad sign. If you're saying the car I can't see a single problem with driving a car around.
Right. I mean, I think it reminds me a lot of his relationship to the WGA. Is kind of like, hey, I'm just a little guy, right? I'm a little birthday
cavalier,
boy,
ahistorical,
and like I can't, I'm a hard scrabble starving artist who has Aaron Brockovich money, and I need I'm trying to make a movie any way I can when like...
And he's not a monster. I just think he's a dork. I think that's what's
he's not a monster. He's a dork. He's wrong-headed, and it's a bummer.
Yeah.
And hopefully he, I don't know, gets back the images of boats sailing across the Caribbean that look like every other. It looks literally like a composite of every shot of boats in the ocean that's ever been ingested by this machine. And he'll like, well, that's not that interesting. Maybe let's go put some models in a bathtub.
I mean, I think that's a great choice for us to segue to the Knick, because if we're talking about some of my favorite images from this season, I was like borderline writing Byron's sublime poems about some of these like water level shots he did of the sailboats out in
I don't
Atlantic.
practice Santeria. It's a Byron sublime poem. I don't know. He probably talked like that, right? Let's talk about it. We're talking about the Knick. Thank you for segueing so beautifully. This is Stephen 2, directed by Season Soderbergh.
That's right.
Nah. We're talking about Season 2 of the Knick, the second set of 10 episodes, directed by Steven Soderbergh, all of them, and written by Jack Amiel and Michael Berger, except for episodes 5 and 8. We have a new name, Stephen Katz. Did you look into Stephen Katz at all?
I did, just briefly. This felt sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say he wrote 2 episodes of Fallen Angels, although not the Soderbergh ones, right?
No, not the Soderbergh ones. But yeah, I think we briefly talked about him on the season 1 episode.
But then he also wrote Shadow of the Vampire, which is a film that you and I are both fond of, I think, unless I'm projecting.
No, you're right, yeah.
And that's the movie about the making of Nosferatu, but what if Max Schreck was a real vampire played by Willem Dafoe? Maybe the best premise of a movie I've ever heard.
Great.
And also like a decently fun movie to watch. He also wrote Wind Chill, which was the film directed by Greg Jacobs that's Emily Blunt trapped in a car in a blizzard.
Yep.
And he I think he also has he has some kind of a big prize.
I don't know about this prize.
He got an award. He got a Bram Stoker award for writing Shadow of the Vampire. Bram Stoker award for Dracula movie that came out this year.
Yeah, pretty good idea.
So that's Stephen Katz, but he just wrote 2 of them.
Did he not do? He didn't do Get a Rope. What's the name of the first season episode?
Get a Rope. Yeah, the big one. I think that was. I think all 10 of them were the.
No. He wrote the Golden Lotus. He wrote a different episode from season 1.
Oh, he wrote one of the first season?
Yeah, that's why we talked about him. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I'm stupid. So,
okay.
How do we want to get into this? How do we want to talk through what happens in the season briefly?
Yeah, I want to do a 2-minute plotter, and then I think we'll use some of our topics because we have a wide range of topics that the season touches on to maybe get into specific subplots. How's that sound?
Yeah, this felt like it's like sort of an advent calendar of research areas.
Yes, and I guess I'm curious. Initial feelings about the show. We're not here to do a review, but what did you think of season 2?
Not as good. I mean, it's seems unfocused. It seems it I think feels a little bit like maybe they found out they weren't going to get a season 3 like in the middle of writing it or something.
At least the Soderbergh narrative is that the entire thing, more or less, like the death of Thackeray, the Clive Owen character, was planned from the beginning. He wanted to do 2 seasons. The Clive Owen's contract was only for 2 seasons. So I don't know if it was a discovery, but look, I agree with you. And I'm sorry to other guests. I was sort of gaslit into. I think I said on an earlier episode to somebody like I feel like my memories that season 2 did not hold up, and they said no, season 2 is just as great. And now having rewatched it, you're wrong, I'm right. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the first season has such a propulsion to it, and it's so exciting to see. Part of it is that you're seeing all this stuff for the first time, and in season 2, it's kind of like, well, what do you got for me this time?
I think there are more of the Mad Men Coke moments that you commented on.
There's so much of the Mad Men shit. They're saying that the future's in gasoline.
I was about to pick the same. Yeah, we came up with this product that it allows us to recycle the byproducts of kerosene. And
what do you call this neighborhood again? Like it's so much winking. Yeah. We invoke the Mad Men picnic scene.
Yes.
Where Betty like just upends the picnic blanket and all of the paper goods just go out into the creek or whatever, but as a way to this kind of, hey, can you believe how they used to live?
Although that I'm gonna push back on slightly, because I think it's doing more interesting stuff ethically about the relationship between our time and this time.
Yeah, no, I think all that stuff is good, but then the stuff that's kind of like a lot of it just feels like I'm putting a team together, kind of, or like the fucking kid at the end of Shanghai Nights, where they're like, "What's your name, little urchin?" "My name's Charles Chaplin, sir."
Yes, yep.
It's all that level of intellectual rigor.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the major threads of the.
Let's do it. Start the clock.
Start the clock. Who's doing?
We can. You want to do a little trade off? All right.
Yeah. Do popcorn.
Okay, season opens with Thack still in the rehab center, however you want to refer to it, and he's doing heroin. He's worse than ever. He's doing cocaine surgery on other patients in exchange for drugs. Meanwhile, we check in at the Knick, and Algie, as is sort of foreshadowed in season 1, is having vision problems because of his fights. He has a detached retina. He can't really do surgery.
Right.
Birdie is still burned on the stuff that Thack was doing, and his fallen sense of a hero, and also his frustration at Lucy Elkins, the nurse, who he was let down by romantically.
Gallinger's wife is she's out of John Hodgman's clutches, although all her teeth are gone. She's picking out new teeth.
Yep.
He's been out of commission. I think he was like on leave basically because his wife killed 2 children, one by accident, one by I guess accident, crazy accident.
Right.
But he's getting back into things.
But he has a lot of resentment for Algernon Edwards as the acting chief of surgery, which is why he goes and rescues Thack and forces him to live on a boat until he dries out, basically.
I gotta learn some knots. I want to be getting into knots.
Yeah.
You've also the main theme of this season is that the Knick is moving uptown.
Mm-hmm.
This was mentioned in the first season about how all of their rich patients moved uptown, leaving only poor people and immigrants as their patient base downtown, which is why they're constantly having money problems. And so the Knick is now officially moving uptown. They're building a new hospital. And there's a question about who is going to be like, is this going to be an excuse to get Algie out of his acting chief surgeon position? It seems like yes. So there's all kinds of drama around building the new hospital, including Barrow finding more and more ways to scheme off the top of that. Difficulty, clashing between Captain Robertson and
Opal, Algernon Edwards' surprise wife, who he had left behind.
The surprise wife.
Yep.
The Hobart Showalter, who's Neely's new father-in-law, who's it turns out has been propping up the Robertsons financially this whole time. You've also got Cornelia begins the season in San Francisco, where it seemed like she was going to like run away at the end of season 1 and then just doesn't. There's like a whole sort of setup like she's going to escape.
I kind of like it's a sort of I don't know, a magic trick anticlimax where they're saying it sort of seems like, I think plot wise, like narrative wise, we expect there to be something to stop the wedding, and then it just happens because it's sort of like an insistence on realism in an otherwise sometimes superficially unrealistic show. Yeah.
So she's in San Francisco trying to help with an outbreak of plague, specifically in the Chinatown district there, which generates mostly just excuses to be racist toward the Chinese people that are not based really in any kind of logical epidemiology practice.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of that. But yeah, big plot lines. Her whole thing, she discovers that there's something going on. Spate's been killed, her health inspector friend.
Yeah.
She's back in New York, and she's hunting down these people who've been infected with the plague and maybe somehow got through immigration. She discovers that it's her own family doing it. She thinks that it's her dad. It turns out to be her brother. Who else have we got? 10-second plot lines.
Cleary and Harry is a big plot line where Sister Harriet has been arrested for performing abortions. She's in prison. Cleary is trying to find ways to clear her name, gets her a good lawyer. He's rustling up money among like her well-heeled clients to raise money to get her out of this bad spot. Eventually, he's able to do this and offers her a place to live with him. She refuses and goes to live at a
home for fallen women.
Yeah, home for fallen women run by other nuns who are absolutely horrible to her because she was performing abortions. Eventually, he convinces her to move in with him. They start a side business manufacturing and selling condoms, which I have some condom stuff to talk about.
Okay, me too.
Can't stop eating the damn things. And then eventually he confesses his feelings for her. She runs out on him. She doesn't like this, and then slowly comes around to realizing she could see a life with him. This isn't what she planned, but it might be the best of what she's got. And then in a truly heartbreaking, like just the season is all about cynics and bad people winning, and you think there's one glimmer of hope, but then it turns out it's actually maybe the worst thing of all. Cleary had set the whole thing up and got her arrested for performing abortions so that he could be her savior and get close to her. Genuinely seems to love her in whatever way that's the part of the plot line I think is the most artistically interesting, is that it's not, it didn't turn out to be like a betrayal for the sake of money or something, just like misguided. Like, this is how I can get her to be with me. Just brutal. All right, we got Gallinger. His whole thing is eugenics, baby. Yeah, eugenics. He's getting into it from a scientific perspective that is clearly motivated by his frustration about Algernon Edwards and his professional career. Meanwhile, at home, he's struggling with his wife trying to recover from her episodes of extreme mental illness. But good news, she's got a sister. Right, good. She's got a sister who is hot on his eugenics and immigrant child beating. She's hot for eugenics. Which, very much a real thing. I also want to talk about women's movement and eugenics movements going hand in hand for a while. Oh, I thought you were going to talk about like race play or something. Nope.
So his whole thing is he just figures out that this is his way of getting back at Algernon, and he sterilizes a bunch of boys at an idiot house.
Idiot house. Yeah. Which is on one of the islands that also houses the psychiatric hospital from Side Effects.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Randall's Island, I think, is like connected to Ward's Island by a footbridge or something. Speaking of feet, we've also got Lucy Elkins, who she is. She's got an interesting arc this season. I didn't expect to like the character as much as I did.
I think she's got a. Sorry to interrupt you, but to me, this is where your frustration with television is also maybe somewhat warranted, because
you think so?
There are pieces of her arc that I like a lot, but television goes on so long that it can kind of ruin itself for you.
It kind of the timing isn't quite right. So the big thing with Lucy is Thack comes back. He's sober to a point, although he very quickly invents snorting cocaine and invents the speedball. But he decides he tries to cut things off with her. Because it was based in his addiction, I suppose. She's heartbroken by this, and right around this time, her father comes to town. Her father comes from West Virginia.
That sounds right. I can't remember which part of the South.
And he sets up a kind of revival, these revival meetings that are based around like confession. It's very Scientology style, although I think Scientology got that from like Christian revival
I think so too.
Culture.
Yeah. I was thinking it's just Baptist style or
people confess their sins to the crowd, which is as a form of absolution, but this is also obviously like great blackmail material. And she tries to, I think she thinks maybe I'm gonna get back on the holy path and confess my sins, and her father beats the hell out of her, and so this sets her on an absolutely incredible path to. This is the best scene in the series, I think.
This along with her encounters with sex workers who she's sort of increasingly interested in from a medical perspective, because it's sort of giving her some autonomy as like a medical professional, but also because they are so comfortable with their sexuality and with themselves, and their sort of recognition of like a realistic recognition of their position as women in the society.
So instead of race play, we get a kind of class play dom relationship that she develops with Henry Robertson, Cornelia's brother. And then also she euthanizes her father while whispering to him about her sinning behavior in a scene that I have a clip of. Hold on, I just want to.
Great.
While he was having sex, I stuck my foot in the mouth of an Oriental and let him suck on it as he ejaculated. And he paid me $100 for the pleasure, more than once. I just wanted you to know everything before you went. Bye, Daddy. Enjoy your trip.
Really
this is a good scene. It's a
really good scene.
I gotta say, Eve Houston in general, very solid performance this season. She's turning
good.
in. Yeah.
And I think those are like the same, I assume, synth steel drums from the Solara soundtrack.
I think so too. Well, this is our guy.
Score. Cliff
Martinez. Yeah.
I would describe. I mean, I know it's more about the foot, but I think still describe this as a
epic penis moment.
Okay, all right. She does talk a lot about penises in that scene, so I think you're right.
Yeah, she does.
If I was inside of one of those floating Bluetooth things, you guys could suck on it Golden Lotus style.
Okay.
Thanks, Kimi.
Do you
Lady and the Tramp
money,
style?
Kimi? What's your situation? Can you do like Office Space style rounding crimes?
I'm mining Ethereum during the show.
Okay.
Cut that out.
All right.
Stop doing that. We just
talked
talked about how we don't like
the
AI.
one that famously you don't mine anymore. Isn't that one of the ones they tried to do, like, we like the environment?
Don't mind if I do.
Pretty good. More of your Catskills, old-timey stuff.
So if as things come up, we'll talk about additional stuff during the
I think
season.
The only other person we have to talk about, Dr. Thackeray. His main arc in the season.
He's on the show.
He is coming back, like you're saying. He was not really in recovery, but he is going through kind of a moral crisis because, if we recall, at the end of last season, in his cocaine-addled mind, he tried to do a blood transfusion without really understanding blood types, killed a child, and now he's acutely aware that even if he believes medicine to be something that is sort of like fighting back mortality, and there's this noble cause, that his generally like incautious maverick behavior has justified in the past. Now he maybe just recognizes that he might have just been a madman who was putting people's lives in danger for basically no reason. So his arc for the season, a lot of it is connected to Abigail, the woman who had the syphilis nose surgery from the first season. His
former flame.
Exactly. His ex-partner, who he is trying to figure out how to help her and how to have her help him, maybe without engaging in his former theatrics. And he also has some moments where he rescues these conjoined twins and conducts a pioneering surgery to separate them. But even there, he has doubts about whether it's the right thing to do, because again, he's sort of aware, like, medically, ethically, they are living lives right now. So like medicine being something that is inherently uncertain, even if it is proven, right? We have to reckon with the fact that like you are intervening in something that might have been okay otherwise. And that makes it all kind of like a real calculation at any given moment. And then at the end of the season, he watches Abby die from an accidental drug interaction between laudanum and ether for a surgery. Basically goes totally nuts and decides to do surgery on himself after ingesting more and more cocaine for his necrotizing intestine, and then fails at self-surgery and dies in front of a theater full of people.
Yeah, which is, I think, about as fitting a death for this guy as could be imagined. This is one of those things where it feels like, well, at least they figured out the finale.
I think so too. And to have all of these doctors, you know, it's one of those like dramatically weighty moments where these people who have all had storylines have to interact with each other together. Sort of goes back to like OG, the Knick season 1 stuff, but now everything's changed. I think it works well. I don't know.
I think it's good. It's poetic. It's sad. And then Algernon takes up Thack's sort of nascent addiction treatment program, where he, with Abigail, sort of accidentally discovered like psychotherapy.
Talk therapy,
and at the end, the show ends with Algie basically asking a guy to like tell him about his dreams.
Can I shout? Is it Mr. Dominchik? I didn't write down his name. But
yes, Dominchik. Yeah,
one of those bit players who like transforms a role. Him talking about his childhood, sort of nonchalantly, his extremely traumatic childhood, sucking on whiskey-soaked rags and playing checkers and talking in Polish is a great performance.
Eugene Pozniak,
great,
who is. Only in this, apparently. I guess he's probably a theater actor or something.
Yeah, what a shame.
But his only IMDb credit is this. There's more to get to, but we'll get to it when we get to it. I think maybe a good place to start is with our friend Eugene.
Let's start with Eugene.
Eugene X.
Yep.
Professor X's son. I mean, kind of.
Legion. Yeah. So we already mentioned Scallinger's getting into it. This is, of course, the moment historically that the United States was swept by the official medical institutions and also the legal structures of the United States were swept by a wave of interest in eugenics. It is coming out of legitimate science in the form of like Mendelian genetics had just been sort of like more formalized, and you know we're understanding that there's such a thing as heritable traits, right? This stuff is real. But the leap people make, like so often happens in science, is how can we use this to further racist beliefs that we pretty much already hold?
Yeah. How does this confirm things that we already were pretty sure about but didn't have proof of yet?
Right.
Yeah.
So even though I think the person who maybe turns it into a popular branch of medical research is this Englishman, it really is kind of a homegrown American thing. After Sir Francis Dalton starts researching it, becomes super popular in the US. There's a bunch of different organizations, many of which were funded by places like the Carnegie Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation. They were putting money into this, and they're putting money into this at the exact same time, especially those institutions I'm talking about were taking advantage of the cheap immigrant labor to create the great wealth that they were building their fortunes on, right? Which is, you know, you can say that it's coincidence. You can say that they weren't aware of the irony of this, but it really does feel like a pattern in the United States that the exact same workforce that you are using, you're creating some type of like weird elaborate theory that allows you to exploit them. Yeah. And there were a couple people that I was just, reading about. Madison Grant. I don't know if you're familiar with this man. He is the guy he's a conservationist. He's the person who protected things like Glacier National Park. He set up the Bronx Zoo. And for him, these were pretty much one and the same. The idea of like being a shepherd or a steward of the future, right? It was sort of like humans have to step in. We are smart enough to understand the course of science. So we also have to understand the course of the races. So he was a big advocate of Nordicism. He wrote a book called The Passing of the Great Race, beloved by one Adolf Hitler, this book.
Yeah.
And he was also, I mentioned the Bronx Zoo. He was partly responsible for putting a human being named Oda Banga, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who is an African man born in 1883, purchased from African slave traders, and literally just placed in a zoo exhibit with an orangutan as a sort of
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, like a stepping stone in evolution or something, right? Like a visualization of how white people evolved from these groups or these contemporaneous existing people. This man, just to tell his story a little bit, so it gets out there, he was part of he was the focus of a campaign by black activists, specifically Robert Stewart MacArthur, who was a spokesman for the delegation of black churches, who petitioned the mayor of New York to basically let this guy out of the zoo. They did, and he had sort of rough time finding work as a man who didn't really speak English in a country that he was brought to forcefully. And in World War I, when shipping and transatlantic transport was closed, so he wasn't able to get back to Africa, he ended up killing himself.
Jesus. I mean, there's a lot of that going to come up, and a lot of the stuff that I was looking at as well.
Yes.
Is people killing themselves.
Yeah. So this is one of a million cases. I think it's relevant also to the Knick that, I mean, I'm sure people may have heard about, but like early gynecology and obstetrics, a lot of that research was done on unwilling slave women. They had real conditions, and these doctors would come in and use their bodies as like laboratories without anesthesia, notably, and then end up taking their discoveries mostly to serve women in the white community. But it's confusing. I don't want to make it sound like it's clear because, unfortunately, I'm forgetting the name of one of these guys. But there was a famous case of this where this person did end up, J. Marion Sims did end up founding like one of the first hospitals for women. But again, it was built on literally the backs of these unanesthetized black slave women. So it's, just one of the like nasty chapters of history where you can say, of course, it's a good thing that we moved towards recognizing diseases that were specific to women and like treating them and as a major problem in society. But all of this stuff is just tied up with institutional racism.
Yep. I mean, the thing with eugenics that I'm curious about, because you did more reading on this than me, is like it could take on this sort of paternalistic, but like Captain Robertson style, well-meaning, as you said, the conservationist guy, tending to the flock. Like I'm just trying to figure out what is best for all of the races to treat them humanely, the way that I would provide the right environment for the anaconda and the penguin in my zoo, right?
I mean, that's some of the like talented tent style, like cultivating the best of a group or whatever stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, the way Gallinger approaches it is clearly from this like personal animus, this personal slight. And he also, he comes across eugenics. This season, I feel like, has a lot more private club stuff. There's all this, the halls of corruption and power. We see a lot more of here. There's the club that Gallinger goes to. There's a whole long process by which Barrow is trying to get into a private club, which involves
the Metropolitan Club. Yeah,
Dr. Mays, who I'm excited to talk about, and then also the Tammany Hall angle. The sort of the secret rooms where decisions get made are a big part of this season. And of course, this is where Gallinger encounters the eugenics ideas, and we see sort of in miniature, like the way that it comes to provide an explanation for the frustrations that he is having in his interpersonal life, which is, this is an explanation that you see ascribed to a lot of, whatever you want to call them, alt-right, online Nazi kind of incel behavior.
I don't think it's incorrect to say. I mean, we've talked about even like deprogramming Nazi stuff. I mean, a lot of it is addressing like childhood trauma and stuff. It's sort of like underlying psychological issues that push people towards things that maybe reinforce their sense of self.
Right, and it can be pitiful and like darkly funny. There's that famous article that mentions some like online incel influencer guy. Trace he says that he began to realize that women were in control of everything when his mom forced him to take his diarrhea medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be as stupid as that, but also, there's a way to sort of psychoanalyze the clearly like deep hateful motivation behind a lot of powerful racists and eugenicists. It's, as we see with Gallinger, it comes from like, this man who is black is like showing me up and everyone says he's better than me and I deserve this job. I deserve this, all of the accolades that he is getting. Why is he getting them instead of me? How can I prove that I deserve them more than him, even though he is like, on paper, even in this horribly racist society, his resume looks better than mine. So how can I prove that I actually deserve what he has?
Yeah. And it also overlaps with, I think one of the things the show does well for Gallinger is that when he is doing stuff with his wife, like trying to protect her or trying to get her treated, it seems to be genuine, right? Like he does seem concerned for his very ill wife, even if he doesn't know what to do. And I think part of that to me is this like humanistic recognition that in like Stephen Crane naturalism, open boat style, like when you are faced with injustice and frustration at the cruelty of nature, you there's all sorts of human reactions that don't make any sense, but it's because it's sort of like illogic responding to illogic, right? And I think that's what seems to be driving him is, he is hateful and he does want to just punish black people generally, or not even just black people, but all the people he believes are inferior races. But it's tied to this sense of like, there's no way to make sense of the world otherwise for me. So this is a very convenient outlet.
Yeah. And this also kind of comes through in the immigration storyline, the plague storyline, where there is this obvious correlation between the Eastern and Southern European immigrants coming over and disease and like sanitation issues. And it's easy if you're kind of stupid and looking for a way for those people to be inferior to you to say, oh, they're just they're like Pigpen. They're always covered in filth. Right. Yep. Instead of looking at their circumstances and like why people who have no money and are being driven to the United States for out of economic desperation, like why they would be stuck in the hold of a ship with a bunch of rats and fleas, and why they would then like be living in a tenement with two other families and not cleaning as well because they don't have the fucking shit that you do. So it's not that they stink, it's that they
even specifically, it's not just that they don't have it, it's that you took it away from them, right? That's the part. That's the thing that I think the show does well. And even though it hits some of the points pretty hard, I would say, and repetitively.
Yeah, sure.
But that's actually not one. I think that they do kind of leave it up to the viewer to figure out, like, the people who are complaining about this, the Robertsons or like Robertson adjacent style rich families of New York, the guy, the head of the Columbia Medical Center or whatever he is in the show. They are literally the ones enriching themselves off of this circumstance. And, they don't want to accept, like you're saying, these are social ills. Even that kind of like understanding of circumstance, deterministic forces is barely on the rise at this time. But I would say that it's a circumstance where it's very convenient for people to not recognize something that would cast a bad light on them, right? To say like, well, maybe the issue is that you are forcing people to live, like you're saying, in extremely close quarters, to be in ships, to not give them proper medical care, to put them in dangerous working conditions where they're breathing in animal-borne illnesses or whatever it might be, right? And that seems unthinkable, but what doesn't seem unthinkable is this very convenient sense that like actually your race is the dominant race and you can go around and sterilize people as you please.
Yeah, I was remembering, I'm trying to find it, but Teddy Roosevelt, who was president in 1901, was himself both a ardent lover of nature and an ardent eugenicist.
That's
and
right.
Like brought this book with him everywhere he went that I cannot find the name of, but it was like a book about like the hierarchy of the races.
Mm-hmm.
He was famous for carrying a lot of books with him, but you know, one of them was like the complete Shakespeare and another one was the hierarchy of the races or whatever it was called. So at the highest levels, these ideas are being played with. And we also to speak about the immigration and the forced like impoverishment of immigrants. Mayor Robert Anderson Van Wyck, who he's mentioned by name in the show.
Yes.
He was the first mayor of consolidated New York City. So the first mayor of New York City once the 5 boroughs were consolidated. And of course, if you need to know what those are, you can look at the trailer for the John Travolta film Gotti, where he goes through with his finger.
Right.
Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Staten Island, the Bronx.
Film, of course, produced by MoviePass. So Robert Van Wyck was the son of the nephew of a Confederate general. He was a Democrat. He was appointed, or he was elected by Tammany Hall. Like he was put in place by Tammany Hall because he would basically let them do their thing. And he was very popular because of as a result of of reversing reforms that were put in place by his predecessor William Strong.
Mm-hmm.
And these reforms were things like bathhouses, like for public places for people to bathe.
Yeah.
And also establishing the New York City Board of Education and like creating parks and also creating the Department of Correction, which we don't think is good, but was like a reform at the time that was negatively received. You know?
And also, if we're thinking contextually and historically, the comparison was not to like letting people do whatever they wanted. The pre-Department of Corrections was presumably just like letting unofficial police style organizations beat people up and enforce
frontier justice.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, you know.
Yeah. So but relatively, it seems like progress. And then Van Wyck was brought low, or nearly brought low, by the Ice Trust scandal.
Yeah.
So the American Ice Company was the only company allowed. They had a monopoly over rights to land ice at New York piers. So they were the only company that was allowed to provide ice to New York City directly. And the head of that company, in a move that is totally unimaginable to those living in the United States right now and today, he decided, I want to double the price of ice so that I can make double money.
Yeah.
Because no one can buy ice from anybody else.
That's exactly right.
And so because this is before refrigeration, this is basically going to kill a lot of people because food and medicine and stuff can't be preserved without this ice.
Right.
There was such a public outcry, and specifically outcry among the people who vote for Tammany Hall candidates, who are a lot of poor people, that they had to reverse this decision. And it was found, of course, that Van Wyck, if you can believe this, his salary as mayor was only $15,000, which at the time was, I think, like $1 billion.
Yeah.
But he somehow still had $680,000 worth of American ice stock that he had not paid for.
Mm-hmm.
It just showed up. Sometimes there's a glitch in the paper that they use to do that.
Sometimes you get a bunch of stock, yeah.
And so, it was his political rivals forced an investigation, and this revealed the monopoly that they had, and it destroyed his political career. Sort of assumed to have set back Tammany Hall in the 1901 elections. And Theodore Roosevelt, who was then governor before he was elected president, it was determined he initiated an investigation and determined that Van Wyck was not personally implicated. So none of this is, of course, relatable at all.
Probably fine. Yeah, if people want to investigate more about the guy who was responsible for this, definitely the Ice King, Charles Morse. Incredible story of this unrepentant grifter who managed to get funding time and time again, did this thing with ice, tried to do it again with copper, but failed so spectacularly that all of his creditors backed out and were trying to pull out money from the bank. So he caused a financial panic because of how much people realized he was going to fuck up another scheme, basically. And then he didn't go to jail for that. He went to jail for another case of fraud. And then while he was in jail, he pretended to get kidney disease and convinced the president of the United States to sign a pardon. And then once he got out, they realized that he was just drinking soap or something to give himself kidney failure. And then he went and did it again. He went and did more fraud. This guy could not stop doing fraud. He was literally in jail next to Charles Ponzi. They were in the same jail block.
Charles Ponzi of scheme fame?
Of scheme fame. So
wow.
These were the guys who were, again, it sounds like just a funny anecdote of history, but as you pointed out with the ice stuff, this had bearing on the lives of millions of people and their ability to live their just day-to-day existence. So, I mean,
this is the same thing with with Elon Musk and his Doge shit.
Right.
It ends up people can't access the government resources that they need to get whatever their medication covered, to get all the kinds of little things that people need that the government supplies are now not accessible to them because of some fucking con man who has an idea, has a wild hair, and the literal fat cats in charge of stuff are well, this guy's my buddy from the racist club that we both belong to. I'll give him this job. And oh, that's weird. I didn't know I had that much stock in his company. I go, well, whatever. It's hard to keep track of these things.
Yeah. Just to circle back and close up some of the eugenics stuff, you've reminded me that just in case people thought that this was a something shrouded in the distant mists of history, that it's name checks in the show that California and Indiana had already signed eugenics laws. That doesn't quite track timeline wise. I think they signed eugenics laws 5 years later, but they were trying to get stuff on the books. When we say eugenics laws, we mean forced sterilization. And this forced sterilization continued until the 1970s.
Yeah.
When it didn't even really stop. There was a famous case where a woman in Los Angeles found out that her doctor at USC Medical Center had done a tubal ligation, and she had maybe signed a consent form while she was already under anesthesia.
We talked about this.
Yeah, we did. But I just want to point out that even then, when she brought this case with a bunch of other women who, if you'll believe it, all were of Latin American origin, they didn't change the law. The law is still on the books. It was not officially repealed. The judge sided with the medical center and said that even if the physician was acting to try to solve the overpopulation problem in a minority community that was famous for reproducing, he hadn't done any malpractice as long as he had gotten some type of consent, which again, this was forced, maybe untranslated consent. So basically the only thing that changed was that he required translated medical forms, which is obviously good. But it's just is the kind of thing that has a legacy that we think of as being something that we look down on. And something I want to credit the show with is that we talked about in our first episode, by bringing in these weird modern touches, I do think it's trying to break down some of those Mad Men condescension barriers.
Yeah, kind of like the film Transit, the Christian Petzold film Transit that I talk about every chance I get.
Exactly, as you should. Incredible film.
Thank you. I am responsible for it. A way to sort of contemporize this historic document. Yeah. Yeah.
And so just to segue to, I think you mentioned you did some condom research. Another famous eugenicist, Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. And this is something that they're acutely aware of, I will say, in their defense. If you go to their website, the About Us page has a lot about how she met with the Ku Klux Klan, and was promoting women's birth control partly as a way to sort of curb reproduction in undesirable races or in people who had heritable genetic illnesses or made them inferior in some way in her minds. And again, I think that just speaks to the murkiness. I'm not trying to let anybody off, but when you are trying to do something like be a first wave feminist who is recognizing that women being treated as like breeders basically is a deep inequity. I don't know. I guess the lesson is like, don't save yourself from drowning by whatever, hanging on to somebody, a child, or I don't know what in my metaphor is.
I mean, I think it speaks to a kind of an issue that I see on twitter.com, which is a website you shouldn't use.
Yeah.
But in contemporary like political discourse, people are afraid to sort of publicly change their mind on things. Right. Yeah. I think because of a historic tendency to say, if you ever thought something one time that was wrong, you're bad forever, which is just not productive. And I think we should we need to encourage not just the two of us, but like everybody. I think we do well to encourage a kind of intellectual
malleability. Yeah, sure,
of
totally.
People who are growing and changing, because a lot of times everybody's going with the flow. It's hard to be a fucking expert on every single issue,
and there may be some things that they're contributing to that are legitimate that we should try to extract from the other stuff.
I mean, I recently saw a post in support of the people of Palestine with a picture from actually many years ago of this person receiving like a kufiyeh in like the 90s, I think, and the person in the image was Mia Farrow. So there's everybody's complicated,
right?
And rising tides lift all boats and things like this. We should also, we gotta call people in rather than call them out. And it's important to acknowledge that things like Planned Parenthood might have their origins in really ugly shit, but a bunch of
But at the same time, they were and they're also facing contextually, historically, Comstock laws and stuff that made it illegal, as they say in the show, to talk about birth control or to talk.
Yeah.
It was considered on the level of pornography to send abortion causing materials or like abortion mentioning materials.
Yes. And so let's talk about the Comstock laws, which are, of course, still on the books.
Yep.
And now used primarily to intercept the transmission of child sexual abuse material, which is a good thing to intercept the transmission of, but it's weird that it's still based on this shit. Anthony Comstock, one of the loser dork-ass bitches of all time, which is the
classic postal service legal activist.
Yeah, so, but I mean, we fucking have those guys now.
I know.
Anthony Comstock, this is a guy he's from New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm already out on him. He was in the Civil War. He was it says he served without incident in Company H of the 17th Connecticut Infantry, but objected to the profanity used by his fellow soldiers. Motherfucker, you guys are being shot at with guns. Yeah. Let them say, "God damn, I almost got shot by that gun," And he works for the YMCA and he becomes a real anti-vice advocate. He creates the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice and basically appoints himself like moral supervisor of the American public. And he influences the U.S. Congress to pass the Comstock laws in 1873, which made illegal, as you said, the delivery by U.S. mail or other modes of transportation of obscene, lewd, or lascivious material, which has an extremely wide definition, of course, and this includes information pertaining to the procurement of abortion, the prevention of conception, and the prevention of venereal disease. So on the one hand, you have all these people who are like these lower, baser races are reproducing too much, but also condoms are immoral. So, I mean, I'm surprised you didn't I guess they did go out and start shooting them, but what the fuck do you want?
Again, to bring it back to the series, I think this extraordinarily muddled milieu is something that the show does a good job of presenting.
does.
Like the judge in Harry's case being like very obviously a Christian Comstock style advocate of this kind.
He's played by, his name is Parkinson Bothamley is the name of the judge, but he's played by Michael Cumpsty.
Wow.
So cathedrals everywhere. He is Comstock is just a equal opportunity violent wet blanket. He hates women suffragists. He hates
this was very common.
Groups.
This fighting women suffragists at the same time that you were trying to say you don't want these racists to reproduce, right? Which is also what makes it weird that feminists were sometimes allying themselves with eugenicists, because the eugenicists didn't really want, they were not reciprocating.
Yes, he arrested a famous abortion provider named Madame Restel in New York, who operated out of New York City, by posing as a customer seeking birth control for his wife. So he's doing lying, which is a sin, I think. Right. And then he came back the next day with the police and arrested her. And then rather than go to trial, she killed herself, which is something that happened an estimated 15 times with people who ran afoul of Anthony Comstock. Wikipedia says through his various campaigns, he destroyed 15 tons of books, 284,000 pounds of plates for printing objectionable books, and nearly 4 million pictures. He said that, quote, books are feeders for brothels. He boasted that he was responsible for 4,000 arrests, and as I said, biographers attribute 15 suicides to Comstock's relentless prosecutions. He was also a major influence on a young law student by the name of J. Edgar Hoover.
Wow.
Yes.
Clint Eastwood's own.
Exactly. Right before he died, they barely overlapped. Another obviously highly hypocritical.
Right, taking
anti-vice,
also using objectivity as a cudgel to accomplish your political goals. Yeah.
I did have there's another person I wanted to talk about. One of his big targets was a mystical sexologist named Ida Craddock. I didn't know that you could be one of those, but Ida Craddock was she wrote sex advice manuals for married people. She wrote real basic. Here's what your body does. This thing that everybody does, but no one is allowed to talk about. And you're lucky if your mom takes you aside on your wedding night. And it's okay, something crazy is about to happen. And so in spring of, she was Clarence Darrow represented her in court. She was a big deal.
Okay.
And she kept getting arrested because of her writing. In spring 1901, she publishes a pamphlet called The Wedding Night. And in this, she also condemned what had come to be referred to as Comstockery. So the behaviors of a Comstock type. And so I have a segment of it here that I'd like to read to you, in part because it's kind of funny, but also because this is the type of shit that he was objecting to. Well, I think that the very first thing for you to bear in mind is that inasmuch as nature has so arranged sex that the man is always ready as a rule for intercourse, whereas the woman is not, it is most unwise for the man to precipitate matters by exhibiting desire for genital contact when the woman is not yet aroused. You should remember that the organ of which you are justly so proud is not possessed by a woman, and that she is utterly ignorant of its functions practically until she has experienced sexual contact, and that it is, to her who is not desirous of such contact, something of a monstrosity. Even when a woman has already had pleasurable experience of genital contact, she requires each time to be aroused amorously before that organ in its state of activity can become attractive. She goes on to say, if you are patient and lover-like and gentlemanly and considerate and do not seek to unduly precipitate matters, you will find that nature will arrange herself the affair for you most delicately and beautifully. If you will first thoroughly satisfy the primal passion of the woman, which is affectional and maternal, for the typical woman mothers the man she loves, it's 1901. And if you will kiss and caress her in a gentle, delicate, and reverent way, especially at the throat and bosom, you will find that little by little, perhaps not the first night nor the second night, but eventually as she grows accustomed to the strangeness of the intimacy, you will, by reflex action from the bosom to the genitals, successfully arouse with her a vague desire for the entwining of the lower limbs with ever closer and closer contact until you melt into one another's embrace at the genitals in a perfectly natural and wholesome fashion, and you will then find her genitals so well lubricated with an emission from her glands of Bartholin, and possibly also from her vagina, that your gradual entrance can be effected not only without pain to her, but with a rapture so exquisite to her that she will be more ready to invite your entrance upon a future occasion.
Okay, so gender essentialism aside, she's saying do foreplay, and she's saying take
do
it
foreplay
slow
and be nice and patient with your new wife,
and recognize your wife as like a subjective actor with her own experience of the world, which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a nice start. But also, to your point, I think I would have to wager guess like the most circumspect language possible to try to avoid making this erotic, right? Like that's a level of jargon that I think has to be intentional. I don't know. I
think so, and she's aiming this at this universal experience within the specific, like, absurd repressive context in which we're only allowed to talk about it as between a married man and woman. But like, this is like vital, important information for most people who are living to adulthood, right? And then a judge in DC where she's living says she has to leave the area because of this pamphlet. So she moves to New York City. Comstock also lives there. So she mails it to him to say, is this illegal or not? And he says yes. And then he uses a pseudonym to order her book across state lines.
Insane.
And then arrests her.
Okay.
She spends 3 months in the women's workhouse. A federal trial finds her guilty. And prior to her sentencing, she killed herself, but not before writing a lengthy public suicide note aimed at him and the unfairness of the trial.
I'm so sorry this happened to her, but good for her using her last acts for more advocacy. Very cool.
But I do have to tell you, this kind of has a rare, not happy ending, but like there's a little something here.
Okay.
On the 2nd of July, 1873, Comstock punched a Dr. Selden in the ribs by an umbrella because the latter had called him a sneak. And Selden, Selden, in response, struck him over the forehead with a heavy seal ring. I don't know what that is. And then the following year, someone else stabbed him in the head. And so he was very affected by this, although he was hit in the head in 1873 and the stabbing was in 1874 and he lived till 1915. So hopefully he was suffering a great deal for a huge portion of his life.
Could have been part of why he was so damn grumpy.
So this is the guy who made it illegal to have condoms, but like condoms were, they were rubber condoms come about in 1858, and then 73 is when the ban goes into effect. But of course, people don't stop having sex and getting people pregnant and getting venereal disease. And so they just go underground. 2 of the major condom companies today were founded in this like moral abyss. There was, so this I enjoyed. In 1883, a German-Jewish immigrant named Julius Schmid. This is from JSTOR Daily.
Okay.
Julius Schmid founded his condom company after buying a sausage casing business.
Sure. Yep.
He named his condoms Ramses and Chic, and then he started making them out of rubber. And his company soon became one of the top-selling condom manufacturers in America. And then he was like the number one until 1916, when Young's Rubber Company created the Trojan brand. And then one of the major steps to legalization of condoms was when the Young company sued a competitor for trademark infringement, and a federal appeals court had to rule that condoms had a legitimate use according to so like the disease prevention. So of course somehow capital and the protection of intellectual property is the only reason that this thing with like
the reason it gets legitimized. Yeah.
Yeah. And just one of the most abundant, like, social good uses you can imagine.
One of the things that truly has been talked about for millennia as a human need, basically.
Yeah. And they've famously fucking using alligator, crocodile dung as a prophylactic in ancient Egypt. I don't know how. I read that fact, but no one ever explained where it goes.
Yeah, but you've been trying ever since. Look, couple things. One, I want to shout out this book by Melinda Cooper called Counterrevolution that does a lot of things very effectively, but the main one that it sort of repeats over and over again is showing that so much of United States social and economic policy has been dictated by like specific weirdos with gripes and social theories that they want to like act out. And they have through very effective political advocacy. Yeah, but they have like truly shaped the course of history and are continuing to do so. She talks about Margaret Sanger in that book. I also want to say that the Knick itself, I think it gets at the kind of like anarchic in a positive way, like anarchic push forward that we had to do sort of like in false starts and abortive attempts and like institutions trying to improve certain things, individuals, like you're saying, mystical sexologists trying to improve certain things, groups of people in collective organizations. And I think that's something that is cool in this world that it creates, right? Sort of like there was advocacy happening on all these different levels. We can't really say that like any single one of them was the one that turned the tide, but there's sort of like good reason to recognize them all and also recognize why they failed individually. Like, you know, if we're talking about somebody like Algernon Edwards, him trying to advocate for Black doctors and Black patients, it was something. It wasn't nothing, right? And we talked about some equivalents in our first episode, right? Some people of this type, other Black activists who were pushing for better medical treatment. But also we know that, for example, advocating through appeals to philanthropists or official government institutions is not always going to be the way. And as the show demonstrates, what might end up happening is you get punched by a eugenicist who taunts you first for using violence, much the way that people do today, right? We could compare it to ICE operators who will say these people are violent, and that's why I'm justified in my violence against these people who didn't do anything to me.
Yeah, or certain people are, I think, trying to bring the legacy of Charlie Kirk down by saying he was just a podcaster, which I resent because he was actually a wannabe broadcaster.
Sure.
And I think that's very different from being a podcaster.
Makes it too.
Also, he was a racist loser, I think is the big part,
big
the real
anchor
reason.
On his reputation.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we're just like at the whim of these fucking weirdos. And I don't really understand what there is to do about it. Like, why does this keep happening? How can we stop it?
What is that?
What was that?
That's something
Did you
that
hear
I
something?
think that was something from real life listeners. That didn't happen on the podcast.
That was outside.
You heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was at your house, but you're safe. But just so you know, you heard that, but you're fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, joking aside, the show I think is kind of saying like, well, if they're going to accuse you of violence anyway, we wish Algernon just punched the guy.
I certainly do. I certainly wish he just punched the guy. One of the first, maybe the only use of the N-word in the show.
Is that true?
Well, it had a real
has
punch.
More weight.
Right? It's the wrong word to use,
sure.
but I mean, I know I was just talking, but it seems like maybe a time to talk about Car, or do you want to talk about something else first?
No. I was hoping that we could use that to talk about Car and talk about.
So a major element of Algernon's story. There's sort of two new voices in the Algernon story, and two new Black characters in the show, prominent ones. The first is Algernon's wife, who we didn't know about, and I think the show finds an effective way to introduce her, this character we didn't know about. It's not like Nikki and Paolo from Lost, where it's just like we were in the background of all those scenes. You just didn't notice us yet. This is like he's keeping her a secret from everybody, including us. Yeah,
and they sort of attribute it to his like personal foibles of just kind of like ditching phases in his life, right? It just becomes like part of his personal psychology. Right,
but we have the arrival of a Black character who's been living in Europe and is sort of she has an absent filter about like the treatment of Algernon and other Black people in New York, and
is less willing to play the game, more unrepentant about advocating for Black rights. Yeah,
and I think very effectively, like on a filmmaking level, like made me feel uncomfortable at the way she is interacting with people in
challenging your like all of our preferences for social etiquette. Yeah,
right. And then civility. I'm thinking, well, no, she's like abundantly right.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a good performance, and I think it's sort of probably a difficult one of a character that nobody's gonna want
be
really,
on the side
because everyone's gonna wish that he would be with Cornelia because it's like they have good chemistry and it's whatever.
Definitely. I think that I would also say the same of Carr, where like very effective and is, I think, there to make the audience uncomfortable and maybe force you to reckon with why you're so uncomfortable about the stuff he does.
So D.W. Garrison Carr, played by Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine, who I'm hoping I say the name right. I'll do my best. He's he plays a kind of Du Bois or Booker T. Washington figure.
Yep.
Also, like anticipating Marcus Garvey, who comes in a little bit later, but a kind of early black rights figure, civil rights figure,
Public
probably.
intellectual / social activist. Yeah.
Yeah,
slash-
black nationalist figure.
Yeah.
We don't hear a ton of his specific ideology.
Right. So we can't figure out where he falls on the spectrum of sort of early black activism.
Right. But he's clearly, by his actions, he's a kind of force their hand type of guy. So you can imagine he's more of a Du Bois.
I think so too.
Than a Washington. But to remind everybody who may have forgotten from American history class, it's often kind of taught as the two poles, the kind of proto Martin and Malcolm of this.
Yeah, although they
this is how
don't
it's
really
taught.
map exactly, but you're right. It is how it's taught. Yeah,
That's how it's taught. There's sort of two ideas.
Yes.
There's Booker T. Washington on one side, who was the incrementalist, accommodationist guy who wanted to sort of work with the white powers that be, and then W.B. Du Bois, who was more of a demand a seat at the table kind of guy, and they both
also not coincidentally, people should read Black Reconstruction, incredible text, but a guy who was interested in socialism, recognizing, I would say, like wider social ills, confronting more about maybe what was wrong with the American project generally.
And Eugene Debs was also interested in black liberation.
Yeah.
So, but they were also both kind of educators and had ideas about how black people should be educated. Of course, this is this moment that's coming out of Reconstruction, coming out of the Civil War. What do we do next? How can we so they're in refamiliarizing myself with this stuff that I've mostly left in history class from school, because I'm more interested in reading like Black Panthers and stuff. I'm not going back to 1900. Maybe I should.
I mean, Souls of Black Folk, also great.
Sure.
There's a lot of
Great
early
stuff.
dual consciousness. Yeah.
But they're looking at a lot of the same questions that we are when we talk about like how do we build a new world, right? The things that you and I talk about, like what skills do people need to have? What kind of thinking
and also,
do we
like,
need to
where do you
encourage?
start? Do you start with institutions? Do you start with education? Do you start with...
Where do you start?
Yeah.
So Washington, who actually I learned his legal name was Booker Twashington, but there was a printing error. That's not true. Washington's thing was kind of was to teach like manual and field labor to black people, and famously he gives this speech that's come to be known as the Atlanta Compromise, where he is talking to the Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta in 1895, and basically says, like, if you agree to like allow African Americans economic advancement and not kill us, we will basically stop trying to participate in politics in the South. Like, so basically let us like make money farming and we won't vote.
Right.
As if, first of all, as if this isn't going to end well.
Yeah. I mean, just as ceding political power is just never a wise idea for protecting your population, but
yes. But his thinking is also, and that of Marcus Garvey, who was a black nationalist and a kind of like back to Africa figure of the later teens, who himself was from Jamaica. But both of them are ultimately like pretty conservative figures,
right? Who in
their interpersonal speech, I was reminded a little bit of, and this is maybe not fair, but of like Theodor Herzl and like the early Zionists.
No. I think that's
they
right.
were like deeply elitist
within the black community. Yeah, they would condescend, and they would even kind of parrot like borderline eugenicist stuff about, like trying to eliminate like certain strains in black culture and this type of thing. Yeah.
So Washington will say things like, there is another class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs. So he's basically saying, like, black people who say, look at the awful state that black people are in, are doing that because they like it and they benefit from the sympathy.
Right.
Yeah, it's nasty shit.
It is. Yeah.
And it's also the kind of thing you might say if you were trying to get like Gallagher to say, this is one of the good ones.
Yes.
You know,
it is one of the good ones behavior. It's also, I mean, you know, it's we see this in Bill Cosby, like respectability politics. Not that that's the biggest problem of his now, but to bring it back also to Sanger, I think, you know, there was just cross-pollination here all over the place. I think W.E.B. Du Bois was part of a project called the Nero Project that was like it was intended to advocate for Black doctors and nurses taking charge of birth control clinics for Black patients and sort of like recognizing that they would be the best advocates for themselves and protecting the rights of these patients. Just to speak to the complexity of history, it got out of control, and I think both of them lost like leadership positions, and ultimately it ended up funneling Black women towards white doctors and maybe setting up like more of a paternalistic relationship. But that's not something that I think is necessarily the fault of either of them. But again, just to show that like the best intentions in history, you know, it's hard to predict how they'll go.
And also the difficulty of working in these structures. But we see this on the show. Where Carr has a hernia. He has the thing that
Algernon was sort of
Algernon had developed the treatment for in the last season in his like basement hospital and his basement clinic. And in an early, I mean, I don't know what Coleman Domingo had been doing before this, but we get I think a pretty early role from Coleman Domingo, which is cool. As a Black doctor working in the Black community who comes with Carr to the Knick to talk to Algie about the procedure that Carr needs, and they kind of like
they're kind of pushing it because we know that Algernon's like, also maybe like over. He is radical for the hospital, but you know, cautious compared to somebody like Opal. They're kind of pushing him in his advocacy.
He enjoyed the minstrel show, as we see later.
Right.
He was like, he loved it.
Well, I mean, also Williams, that's also complicated. I mean, Williams and Walker, early minstrel show stuff. Yeah, that's.
Yep. That's bamboozled territory. When we do the guestless episode on Spike Lee's Bamboozled.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But the idea is to get Algie, who's done the procedure before because he invented it, to do the procedure, and they'll do it at the Knick where they have better equipment and whatever, and also sort of force a precedent, which seems like a great way to. It seems like a good idea. Then, of course, this actually puts him further in harm's way because what happens is that Gallagher sabotages it by like messing with the fucking proportions of the ether or whatever, and like
I think he like switches it to curare or something. I don't know. He switches out some drugs. He
tries to undermine Algie so that he can then save the day, but also in a way that could easily have just killed this guy for his own like potential career benefit. So,
and this is melodrama, but which I want to get into here in a second. But I want to let you wrap up. Is there anything else we need to get a sense of Black nationalism in this moment?
Yeah, there's just a fascinating guy, a really early Black nationalist figure. Who I was not aware of, named Martin Delaney. Did you know about Martin Delaney?
I don't know if I did. Tell me about it.
Abolitionist, journalist, physician, military officer, and writer. He's credited with creating the phrase "Africa for Africans."
Ah, okay.
Born a free person of color, and then travels in the South, and he trains as a physician's assistant. He was like, he refused to leave Pittsburgh during these cholera epidemics and stayed and treated patients, even though doctors fled the city. So Thack does this. We've got a bit of, also the Pit origins, maybe. He also worked alongside Frederick Douglass, publishing The North Star. And he was one of the first 3 Black men admitted to Harvard Medical School in 1850.
Wow.
But then they were all dismissed because of the white students' outcry.
Okay.
And so he then, like, he was in the Civil War. He recruited for the United States Colored Troops and became the first African-American field grade officer in the Army, whatever the fuck that means. So seems like a really cool guy. But then he becomes politically active in South Carolina after the war and ends up working for the campaign of this Southern Democrat named Wade Hampton III, who was like an extraordinarily white supremacist guy who was like using the red shirts, which was like a proto-Klan like paramilitary group to terrorize black voters, and I don't really know what Delaney was doing for him, but it's like 150 black people were killed. So anyway, history is complicated. People are living within it and making mistakes and stuff. But I was fascinated to learn that, like Che, some of these people are also doctors, some of these historic figures.
And I guess to close it up with the show, I don't know that the series ends up with any kind of final statement, which I think is arguably more interesting. I don't know that they try to wrap up all these threads either for the eugenics thing. It's just sort of to say like, this is what was happening. Even Mad Men, I think, can sometimes get into the territory of trying to say like, okay, and this was why we moved on from this, right? Sort of like turning it into a specific chapter. I don't know that the Knick really does that. It just says that this was part of the political landscape. This was part of people's individual lives in different ways. And it varied immensely from person to person based on class, location, their career, whatever, right? At the end of the show, like you said, Algernon, he is not going to get a position at the new hospital. But then, of course, because of plot narrative stuff, the new hospital is not going to exist anyway. But it seems like he decides, also based on his dwindling vision because of his fight with Gallinger, that he's looking for another type of medicine to help people. So I think maybe if there is a bow on this, it's the sense that like there's lots of ways to become an advocate for people, and he is specifically trying to help these addicts and people like Thack, who maybe he feels some amount of solidarity with, right, in the sense of like they're being downtrodden. A lot of them are immigrants. They're being cast aside and being blamed for what is largely like a social disease. And maybe he feels in some affinity with that. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, at least as of like a year and a half ago, they were still talking about Barry Jenkins potentially heading up a season 3 or a spinoff.
I heard that too, yeah.
With André Holland, with Algernon set in like during the Harlem Renaissance. And Holland, at least in 2024, was like, I still want it to happen. Like, I'm trying really hard to make this work. He talks about loving doing the show. So I think it's the kind of thing where, like, whatever, maybe it's the right executive and the right, like, space in everybody's schedule. I'd be interested to see it. I never saw the Underground Railroad,
I liked it.
The Barry Jenkins show.
Yeah, I enjoyed the show.
But maybe he could do kind of a crossover, and Holland, who of course is wonderful in Moonlight after this. Maybe he could like meet Mufasa.
Okay, sure. Also
like
directed by Barry Jenkins.
At the zoo. He could be at the zoo.
That could happen. Yeah.
Have they ever revealed when? Like, is The Lion King taking place in like 1301 or like 3008?
Great
maybe?
Question. Yeah, that's a good point. Could be.
So that's the black nationalism question.
All right,
answered. We're done with it. We figured it out.
Yep, we solved the question of black nationalism. Yeah, I wanted to talk very briefly. I was reading from this book by Ben Singer called Melodrama and Modernity.
Right.
It doesn't talk about the Knick specifically. I think the book was published in like 2007, so that would have been very surprising.
Yeah.
But what it does talk about is this sort of overlooks periods, particularly like in the exact same time period as the Knick, like turn of the century, when melodramas were a dominant form at the exact same time that film was becoming like the dominant art form.
Yeah, you get some early film stuff in this season too, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's part of what inspired me to look into Norton a little bit more. Yeah, that's right.
Well, with Jim Norton, who's weirdly become like a voice for trans humanity within.
Is that true?
That man, because he's married to a trans woman.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and so he's weirdly, he's like a guy who gets in those rooms or whatever and can talk to Joe Rogan about like, yeah, my wife has he makes jokes about like my wife's dick is bigger than mine. And
right.
Like it's great.
This guy like uses the F slur, but also is advocating for trans rights or something.
Yeah, he's saying that they are people too.
I love these guys. Yeah.
Yeah, which is weird. It's like a weird, but like
I did not know
maybe that is one of the most valuable types of
it's true. Maybe
ally we can have. I don't know.
Better than being just like annoyed on the internet in a way that nobody's going to listen to. I don't know.
And he's also like he seems like one of those guys rather than having someone whose presentation is like immediately going to make people change the YouTube channel. Maybe having Jim Norton be the guy. I don't know. I'm not up to date on this, but Jim Norton is a very bizarre figure.
This is all news to me. This is interesting. Well, I guess I'm happy he's out there, unless it turns out he's been saying other bad stuff. But
I don't know. We'll find out.
All right. So this book, I think it's relevant for a couple reasons. Like you said, in the show, they are, I think, making a lot of early film, and like its relevance to technological changes, and also how it's overlapping with how we understand each other. Right. It's like part of this social acceleration, this acceleration of relationships, of our understanding of psychology, of like literal motion, right? Like within an urban environment. All of this is stuff that comes up in the book. So I think it's if people want to check it out, it's very good. Part of the argument that the book makes, a couple of different things. One, it talks about this like Walter Benjamin theory that dominant art forms evolve because of like social changes, and that happens along with changes in perception. And he is responding, the author is responding to this guy, David Bordwell,
a frequent referent on this show, or at least used to be back when I read books.
Definitely. That's all right. That's okay. You're reading comics. I don't know. What are you reading?
Subway Surfers videos.
That's mostly cool. Some of the best books ever written. So they're sort of in this intellectual exchange where Bordwell was, I think, doing the understandable skepticism aimed at any kind of like Frankfurt School style people, where you say like, do you know what science is? You know, when you say the human perception is changing, are you saying like their eyes are changing? But I think Singer makes a very good argument for saying, well, like, first of all, there is such a thing as neuroplasticity. Speaking of Subway Surfer, where like you can actually change the way that your brain registers the world around you, often for the worse. Also, sometimes we're not talking literally about like biological changes. We're talking about like habit changes, or ways that we characterize things, sort of like intellectual changes, right? In our intention or something like that. So I think to bring this back to the Knick, if we're talking about the style of the show, I think the style is very, very effective, in addition to just being aesthetically pleasing and unique and just like, you know, visually Soderbergh, but also specific to this sort of like leather and whitewashed electric world. I think it is kind of like recreating some of this stuff on screen in a way that I think is very, very effective, to sort of say like, okay, the rhythms of the show, like the literal pacing of the editing, is often, I think, matching the synth soundtrack that we've talked about already. And it's matching this like on-screen discussion of acceleration of things like subway technology, whatever, right? So I think it's just a good instance of like visual language reinforcing thematic language. And on top of all that, the reason that I wanted to bring this up now is that in the book, he talks about melodrama as something that is often opposed to realism by like film theorists. Even at this time, they would often say like, you know, I hate melodrama. I'm tired of melodrama. I want to see. Yeah,
it's often queered and feminized. There's lots of work on this. Yeah,
he talks about that too. He says even though it mostly focuses on like 60s or like Cirque melodrama or something, but the point that he's trying to make, and I think it's the one that's the most relevant for the show, is that if you are trying to tell a story about realism in a world that is like entering a new stage of irony, as we usually say with modernization, right? There's a reason this is like the rise of T.S. Eliot's, like, you know, modernism is often where we see irony enter like mainstream literary language and stuff like this.
Right.
But what he's saying is that it may not be like either as sincere as people characterize. They'll often say it's this sort of like hyper sincerity, but it's also not like fully ironized. And in some ways that makes it a more potent tool, because you can use it to say like things that are true in an exaggerated way. And maybe that is more effective than just using a hyper naturalistic way. Because it's sort of saying like, if we are recognizing that we exist in this accelerating world, if you are trying to literally, I think, like get people's attention about an issue, if you tell that story through a naturalistic form, it won't register with people in the same way that real events do, right? Sort of saying that like the naturalism shouldn't be defined by whether like the literal pacing is like a slow cinema look at a horse in Italy or whatever, right? It should be, Are you meeting people at like an emotional register, making an emotional impact that will have some type of correlation with their lived experience, right? So sort of like it doesn't have to match literally what life looks like, but rather it has to like feel the same way life does. And I think I don't know, maybe you can disagree, but I feel like that is what the show is aiming for in its sort of like heightened truth. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at. I'm reminded of like a lot of the things that Werner Herzog says about ecstatic truth and the relationship between his documentaries have a lot of like construction in them, and his narrative films have a lot of documentary in them. Yep. But also just thinking about like the relative effectiveness and maybe a little teaser for an episode that we might have coming up on the Patreon soon about perhaps a divisive recent film dealing with some political topics, but also a lot of entertainment that may have won the Academy Award for Best Picture a few weeks ago. Like, there's a question of what's the best path to like making effective art, right? Is it trying to be as, I don't know, ideologically uncompromised as you can and make something like fucking like a Godardian Maoist, like a Maoist Godard film with like words on the screen that's like unwatchable, or is it using genre trappings or like television rhythms to kind of get people's attention and talk to them where they are? I don't have an answer to this, but like there's I think getting upset about melodrama is the stuff of like, I'm a TV critic or a film critic, and all I ever do is watch these things and think about them. And I haven't, I can't relate to like the average consumer anymore, the average viewer. Yeah.
And look, I think people will often, even in the book, he talks about like how diluted the term melodrama is, where they're sometimes just using it to try to talk about like bad dialogue, right? It's like you are trying to write a realistic scene and doing it poorly. We call that melodrama also.
Right. Or like when people use the term manipulative for
right. Yeah.
You know that this guy's name is Clive.
Yeah.
You're being manipulated into thinking of him as John.
Yeah. He's not even from this country.
No, he's not from here at all.
He's one of these nasty immigrants.
He's from Hawaii. Hawaii Clive-O. Did I say that on the last episode?
I don't think so. I like it.
Thank you.
If you did, I missed it, so I'm glad you said it.
I'm curious if, like, because we called out some stylistic highlights of the last season, but were there moments stylistically, filmmaking wise, that you wanted to shout out from this go around?
Yeah, I think in general there's an emphasis on like settings, which we've talked about in Soderbergh before, right? The sort of sense of like entering the scene before the character's there. I think it's come up on Bubble and a bunch of other stuff. As like treating the world as a thing that exists primarily, which you could call Marxist, although I don't think Soderbergh.
The fifth character.
Yes, exactly. Manhattan.
I guess that's where they are.
Staten Island.
Let's get John in here. Either of them. Gotti or Travolta.
Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Staten Island, the Bronx.
So I guess there were just a lot of nice moments of that in the show where like they would open on the operating theater or somebody's office or the ceiling or something, and then have characters enter. I mentioned the ocean I like a lot. There's also just a weird shot of Thack from like desk view of Thack underneath him. I don't know if you remember when he sort of like filled the screen above the camera, which I felt like was a very Soderbergh shooting the plane underneath in Oceans or something.
Oh yeah. I think I remember the shot you're talking about.
And then just a lot of beautiful use of close up, which I can be a little bit averse to when it's overused. But if we're talking about like pushing a truth or like a hyper emotional truth, I think it's in the scene between Algernon and his dad when they are kind of talking about like lived Black experience and like what the emotions that Algernon feels. This is after he's been hit by Gallinger. And they just shoot it in like extreme close up that is going in and out of focus. And in this moment of like these two guys trying to understand each other, I just thought it was like, it's not subtle, but it effectively reinforces the stuff that's going on. So those were some of my faves. How about you, Matt?
Yep. I'm thinking a lot about the use, and this isn't strictly in this season, but there's a lot of it here as well. The Soderbergh's use of light, and specifically like to speak to what you were talking about with this kind of half ironized or whatever the purpose behind presenting things in a particular way. Just Soderbergh like realizing, in the sense of making real, the way that the world would look at the time, the way things would be lit in a kind of Robert Eggers way or a Barry Lyndon way is probably what Soderbergh's thinking of.
Sure, yeah.
And it's really fucking dark sometimes.
So the scene between Barrow and his wife stood out to me for that reason, where they're having a candlelit dinner, and you're like, hey, how are you guys having a conversation right now? It's like you're in the woods. It's extremely basically
dark in here.
Yeah.
Or in Abigail's house, it's like not that dissimilar from the opium den lighting. Similarly, the opium den lighting, and the also the fire scene. I mean, the fire is very CGI, but the way that we're presented with Captain Robertson's death is like specifically from Cornelia's point of view, where it's like not very spectacular. Like we kind of see a body fall behind a fence.
It is,
and we don't cut to him dead.
No, it's got like a real like biological realism kind of like anticlimax thing to it.
Yeah. And then my favorite shot of the season, I think, or favorite stylistic moment is Cleary's confession, where he goes in the confession booth and then the camera stays outside. We get some like really, really nice like Frederick Wiseman style. Yes, Wiseman. It reminded me of an early Terrence Davis short. There's like his first 3 shorts were collected as and released, I think, like after Distant Voices Still Lives or something, as the Terrence Davis trilogy. They were released but it's, I think, the one called Madonna and Child or the one called Death and Transfiguration. But there's a bunch of shots in a church, and it's Terrence Davis talking about basically being horny for like images of the Christ.
Okay,
you can imagine.
Yeah.
But just these kind of static shots of the interior of this church while Cleary is confessing, and you hear his voiceover, but it's like, I think a decently subtle way of conveying that this thing that he thinks is this action that he thinks is contained to this private chamber is having effects outside of it.
Definitely.
And also just giving us a more interesting thing to look at than 2 people talking through a grate, you know?
Well, and to get back to what we were just talking about, it is a moment of, I think, kind of high TV melodrama of like this betrayal. To me, that's, real TV plot stuff.
Soapy.
But to match it with these shots that you're talking about, which are just like stunningly composed, they're changing angles in this way we talked about for Soderbergh. Maybe I'm just doing Boss Baby stuff, but it also reminded me of First Reformed, the like empty church. Like what is this?
I don't think.
No, okay.
I don't think that's Boss Baby at all.
Okay.
I mean,
it's like, what does this represent when it's vacated of the people who give it meaning, right? Or like recontextualized.
Or Zone of Interest.
Yes.
A little bit.
Yes, definitely. So I agree with you. It's a tremendous sequence, that sequence.
Do you have anything you'd like to hit on before? I think that, not to toot my own horn, I didn't write it, I just found it, but I think this bit of sideshow, freak show history that I came across, I think is a good way to close out.
Okay, yeah. The only other thing, very, very quickly, I want to shout out this book that I just read some pieces of, but it was just a good book called The Barbary Plague that was specifically about the San Francisco plague epidemic. I think it just, reinforced a lot of stuff that you already mentioned early on, where it did start in Chinatown and it did evolve from a plague outbreak in China that killed like 15 million people between China and India. So I guess this is also respect to our guest, Dave Marr, from the last episode, who made some wonderful, cogent arguments about COVID resonance. And this book is talking about like government cover-ups in San Francisco. The mayor denied it. The governor denied it. And then as soon as it was acknowledged, they tried to blame it on Chinese people, which should sound familiar.
Yes.
And then just the course of action that was taken to try to like preserve business interest, while also, for example, in Honolulu, where this also comes up, I think they mentioned in the TV show, to try to cleanse this plague, they just burned down like 6,000 people's homes in Chinatown.
They burned down a bunch of Honolulu,
Yeah, and then this incident basically just like disappeared from history until a couple historians did the work to bring this back and talked about the ridiculousness of, there was a San Francisco article that said something like, why San Francisco is plague proof. So, I just think if we're trying to learn from history with the show and also talk about how we're not better than these people, this is a great example. And people should look into it.
Yep. Another thing people should look into that we don't really have space to get into here, but I did think it was interesting that the little sort of Dr. Indiana Jones flashback slash Che flashback that we get of Thack saving Captain Robertson in Nicaragua in 1894. It's interesting that it happened in 1894 because this would have been during the Nicaragua crisis of 1894 to 1895, which I didn't know anything about, but I would love to learn more about it, and I encourage any interested listeners to check it out. But basically, the Mosquito Coast, or the Mosquito Reserve, occupied this odd, specific relationship with the government of Nicaragua and specifically Great Britain, which was sort of the colonial power in that part of Central America at the time.
And if I remember correctly, this is the period, this is like post-Walker stuff. I don't remember the name of the Nicaraguan president who sort of takes over and is kind of like...
Zelaya, yeah. And is anti-colonial. And then what is it going to be, like 1910 when the United States takes us all back? Something like that. But the Mosquito Reserve is a suzerainty of Nicaragua,
right. Which
means that it's, I think, kind of... somewhat, I maybe this is an oversimplification. It's a quasi independent state where it basically has like control over its internal boundaries, but no control over its relationship to the external or something like that.
Interesting.
But it's an indigenous held territory because it's held by the mosquito. And so basically Nicaragua transfers it like tries to fuck with a treaty basically because of Britain's like colonial ambitions,
right.
and
Economic
Nicaragua
pressure,
invades the Mosquito Reserve and deposes the prince there who was a indigenous mosquito leader.
Okay.
And then British, this is under Zelaya, who was like the anti-colonialist guy, and then British and American intervention pushes the Nicaraguans out. So this is like a classic kind of, we're on the side of the little guy, but only because it furthers our interests.
Right.
And then there were like riots and repeat invasions, and basically as a result of this, this period of autonomy for the Mosquito Reserve goes away, and specifically Zelaya establishes it as a department, an official department of Nicaragua called the Department of Zelaya, which is the kind of thing that you should kill somebody if they do.
Yeah.
In 1894 in a video game. But so anyway, check that out. That's interesting. I wanted to kind of bring things to a close with looking at sideshows and freak shows and this kind of Coney Island museum thing that is a new location in this season where... And
also sort of like Eastern mysticism as something that like dovetails with science in this moment. Like they're both kind of new.
Yeah, these questions of like, well, what maybe this is... Because if X-rays seem about as crazy as hypnotism...
It's very much that. Yeah. Then, maybe my fake Orientalist technique that I made up is also real.
Which is the kind of argument that the AI boosters remind me of. But,
sure.
Sorry, Dad. But I found this book by a guy named Benjamin Reiss that's called The Showman and the Slave.
Okay.
Race, Death, and Memory in Barnum's America. And so it's published by Harvard University Press. That's the school that kicked those 3 black students out because the white kids got mad. Just to remind you. But it's about P.T. Barnum's introduction to show business, and of course, like, this sideshow stuff, the traveling shows, the medicine show, the Wild West show. As we learned in our Bronco Billy episode, this is like the origin of American mass culture. This is like, without this, we don't have the Knick, right? We don't have any of this. P.T. Barnum's introduction to show business, he was like a failed businessman or whatever, like everybody, was specifically through his like chance acquisition of a woman in 1835. He's a 25-year-old dry goods salesman. He acquires, much like the guy who kind of owns the conjoined twins, acquires an old, infirm black slave woman named Joyce Heth. And his presentation of her, he tours around with her. A man named R.W. Lindsay had toured her around already, but he like acquires the show.
I also came across, this seems frequent that people are just handing people off. Yeah.
So she is being displayed as supposedly a 161-year-old woman who had been the former nurse of the infant George Washington.
Okay.
And Lindsay can't turn a profit with him, so he like sells his interest in the exhibit to Barnum. So there's like a question, first of all, of her ownership and her like personhood, because it's 1835, but it's not they're not in slave states. And he displays her all over the country. Crowds go nuts for this woman who she'll tell stories about being there at his birth and like breastfeeding him, and she'll sing the hymns she had supposedly taught him. And it says, quote, her...
sorry to interject, but this does remind me of something that the show does investigate, which is like, how much of this was just a desire for there to be something like more, right? And I think, we could argue that this is also coming out of the miserable urban existence of these people of like, well... You
mean like an escapist desire, or like maybe there's something magic out there?
Yeah, I do think that. I'm like,
that
seems like part of the attraction of this, of the like world. I don't know. Did we get a name for this sort of like Orientalist World's Fair thing that they keep going to?
I think it's called the Palace Museum. Okay. I was looking, I don't think it has a specific antecedent except that there were a bunch of these on Coney Island and things like that.
Yeah, but this, it just seems like the only reason people could have believed this is if they really wanted to believe this, because otherwise that sounds like the stupidest story in the world. Like the Siberian twins being raised by acorns that they found or whatever. Right.
Exactly. And maybe it some of it, people had a relationship to it that the same relationship to it that they do to like stage magicians, where they're like, I don't know how he did it, so I'm sort of amazed by the fact that I saw it, and I know it's not quite right, but I like...
The pleasure is just, sort of like in
asking. The trick,
Yeah.
The guy's name is Clive. But it says, her debility was a draw too, and many came to gaze on, even to touch her amazingly decrepit body. Joyce Heth was advertised as weighing only 46 pounds. She was blind and toothless and had deeply wrinkled skin. She was paralyzed in one arm and both legs, and her nails were said to curl out like talons. One observer says she resembles a mummy of the days of the pharaohs, so obviously like orientalizing. But then when she died, Barnum turned her autopsy, or potential autopsy, it may have been a hoax, into its own attraction. It was performed in public, 50 cents admission. 1,000 spectators watched this pseudo surgery in New York, and a respected surgeon like carved into her body, and then he just determined that she was no more than 80, obviously, because no one's 161. Right. And then Barnum later claims like, she tricked me, or like, I never claimed this was true, or the guy who sold her to me tricked me, or whatever. But there's this, in the history of sideshows, there is this... It's tied in with slavery. It's tied in with racial hierarchy, and it's tied in with exploitation, obviously, as we see in the show. And there's also a guy named Zip the Pinhead, a guy named William Henry Johnson, who is displayed as Zip the Pinhead, who's from New Jersey.
I've heard of this guy,
who probably had microcephaly, where his head is small for his body. And then Barnum dresses him in a fursuit and bills him as the missing link, with a big sign next to him that says, "What is it?"
Yeah.
So, there's the Hottentot Venus people probably know about.
Right. Bringing it back to our eugenics questions. This is all, yeah.
Along with, like, side by side with this, there were these ugly laws. Do you know about ugly laws?
I don't know if I do. Tell me about this.
These are laws that, much like the eugenics laws and the Comstock law and all these other things that are still on the books, or on the books well into the 70s.
Right.
These are usually, like, more specifically called unsightly beggar ordinances, which are laws basically deeming it illegal. This is the one from San Francisco. Deems it illegal for any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or deformed in any way so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object to expose himself or herself to public view. So it's basically a way to arrest disabled people for being in public.
Yep.
And so, like we've talked about with sex work, like we've talked about with all kinds of ways that people try to make ends meet. Like, you can either, I guess, get a job as a freak to be laughed at, or you have to hide from public view lest you be arrested. But of course, if you are the withered-armed Habsburg prince, no one's going to arrest you for being unsightly because you have money. So all these things... I would
even say this comes up even in Lucy Elkins' story, the nurse, to remind people, which is just like, if you want to get ahead as a lower class woman, either you're using your sexuality or you're extremely lucky. But then if you choose to go down that path of using your sexuality, then even other women will police this and sort of like maybe in a kind of paternalistic way.
Cornelia tries to do in like a kind way.
Right. Which again, I'm not doubting that the character is like has the best intentions, right? But it's also saying I'm closing the only door to you to have a comfortable life. And
then I think the last shot of both of them in the show is Cornelia going down the stairs while Lucy goes up the stairs, much like Behind the Candelabra, the kind of like revolving door of boy toy.
Right.
So all these, disability and race and gender and class, all these things are intertwined. And I think, as you mentioned with Du Bois and Sanger and Debs, we were talking about, I think if you want to find the people who were probably closer to right back in the day, it's usually the people who were like working with somebody who were working intersectionally with people in other causes, because these things have kind of always been overlapping and interrelated. And so, that's the Knick, baby.
Yeah, if I can connect it to, I think, one of the series' best final notes when we're watching Thack do surgery on himself and he starts to die in front of these people. I think it's extremely well acted. He says that he's losing peripheral vision, body temperature dropping, and then his last line is, "This is it. This is all we are." And I think so much of the show, from the beginning, we get James Christensen's speech and Thack's speech about like pushing back mortality and, killing God or dethroning him or whatever he says.
Yeah.
But it just seems like it's just a reminder that like so much of our weird, neurotic human behavior, which sometimes transforms into Comstock Law style, like massive institutions that last 100 years, is just like a fear of our bodies and our mortality, right? I don't mean to just boil it down to that. That sounds stupid to say that like racism is just you being afraid of the fact you're going to die one day. But I do think a lot of stuff that becomes like more complex and is meant to be, some type of intellectually rich discussion is just like, the problem is that it's very difficult to accept that you are like a bunch of cells that have vibrated together in consciousness, and it's soon going to fade into nothing.
I can't wait.
Sure.
I'm excited.
We can get it on the calendar right after next episode.
I'm already modeling it.
Oh, cool.
Oh, with like math and stuff?
Yeah, it looks super boring.
Kimmy,
Hey,
come on. Hey, you know what happens 5 years after the events of this show?
Big earthquake?
Well, you're not wrong. I was thinking of another earth-shaking event. The birth of Clinton Eastwood Sr. happens in 1906.
Well, look, I think you're right to finish on this, because also if we're trying to say like this is not that long ago, and in fact it is now, some of these guys are basically still here.
Some of these guys are basically still here.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our episode on the Knick season 2. I would like to see the season 3 with André Holland.
I would too.
I don't care. I don't have anything going on. And then also, speaking of what I have going on,
I'm more interested in that than AI John Lennon.
Yeah, I mean, Soderbergh's got a couple of things. So he literally just like announced more episodes for us. He says, so the John Lennon thing is coming out in May. In June, the box set of all the films he made that he owns will be ready. So I assume that's the Mr. Neff and it's assorted things.
Butcher's
he's going to sell them off his website.
Can he release that stuff? I don't know. I guess he
says he's going to sell them off his website as his white album. They're individually stamped and signed. So patreon.com/podcasty for me.
You can loan. You don't have to buy it. We can just loan. One of you rich guys buy it and just give it to us for a week.
Yeah.
Or something.
Is there a Martin Shkreli in the Patreon audience? He says he finished his book on directing, which will be released as an app. So he finished his app on directing.
Hell yeah, dude. This is cool.
April,
this is funny.
At the end of April, which is like 2 weeks from now, and the proceeds are going to go to a cat charity in Britain, which is, we like that.
We like that too.
And then his Spanish-American War movie. So we're never going to be done with this guy. And I did mean to mention this also, that we actually have every episode of the show has been brought to you by AI.
Oh yeah, sorry, we should mention that.
That is Adderall and Imodium. That's A&I guess.
Podcaster Speedball. What do we call that?
Yeah, that is the Podcaster Speedball, at least for me. Let's close out here with Popcornopolis.
This is Popcornopolis, the segment where we ask our guest, Do you like popcorn?
We don't have a guest, but any popcorn news for you?
No. I've been eating a lot of chips recently.
Oh, yeah? What kind of chip you got?
I've been eating rancheritos. These are...
What are they called? Rancheritos?
Yeah, rancheritos, if you like.
Rancheritos.
Just some of the best chips that have ever been made, guys. It's, you know...
Did I have these?
I think... I can't recall if you did.
I was eating those lime and salt ones that look like little rings. They look like SpaghettiOs, like dry SpaghettiOs. I ate so fucking many of those. It was gross to me.
Yeah. No.
Both these?
Yeah, but that's not these. Yeah. So that's my popcorn news. What about you, man?
Yeah, that's good. I have been... the famous podcast girlfriend turned me onto a new Trader Joe's popcorn preparation. Seems like they have a new one about weekly, but this is called like piquant popcorn. Popcorn. And it's... I spoke a few weeks ago about Homer's Blend, the lesser evil popcorn flavor. This appears to be the same components of that, but in a different proportion. I think there's more nutritional yeast. It seems it's got more punch to it. Okay. And it's good. They're both good.
They sound good.
I think I might like the Homer's Blend a little bit better, but my girlfriend likes the Trader Joe's one, so that's the one that's in the house.
And that's the variety of human experience.
Yeah, because I read Ida Craddock's The Wedding Night, and she said to get the popcorn your girlfriend likes.
And then eventually your
or she will find you monstrous.
Legs will be intertwined and you will melt together. Kind of a nice euphemism.
She uses the phrase genital union a lot in that, which I feel like we should start salting for the genital union.
Okay.
Don't salt it, actually.
Yeah, that's
gross.
One of the things you can't use.
Anyway, that's it for us. Remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review, helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad, have Jim Norton film you talking about it. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pod Casty for me if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a two-person Steven Soderbergh podcast. You can email us at podcastyforme@gmail.com. All this is at podcastyforme.com and shootingyourselfinthehead.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. We'll be back in 2 weeks. If you can't wait that long, sign up for the Patreon. Bye.
Bye.